Ball with 12 seconds left. Picked up now. They're chanting Thompson's initials into the closing moments. 5 seconds left. Puck out of the zone, and that is going to do it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Carolina. We are all square heading to the Tar Heel State. Final score, Washington 3 and Carolina 1.
John Walton on Caps Radio last night with the final seconds of Washington's Game 2 series evening win over Carolina. Really good win, totally different from Game 1 after the first period, which felt like an extension of Game 1. But starting in period 2 last night, the Caps were clearly the better team, and it paid off as they go back to Carolina for Game 3 tomorrow night. Sean McDonough was on the call last night for ESPN. That didn't make a lot of you happy for some reason. He'll be on with us at 12:30 today. Today is mock schedule teaser day. 11 a.m., an hour from now, I'll give you my Washington mock schedule season opener and one other significant mock schedule game for Washington. And then we'll do most of it on Monday, although I'll have some of it out this weekend on my podcast. But I do want to mention, I have seen some of the leaked games, and I will be honest with you. I finished my mock schedule yesterday, right after the show. In fact, I spent some time working on it, finished it up, and those leaks sometimes are right, and sometimes they're dead wrong. I had Mike North from the NFL office. He's one of the key people involved in making the schedule on the show roughly a month ago. You're going to hear a lot of what he said about Washington and how they're viewing Washington this year, and Washington on holidays, Washington in prime time, and what he thinks about all of these leaks on the schedule that start coming out a few days before the schedule comes out. The schedule officially comes out on Wednesday of next week, but on Monday, the NFL will start to announce some of their highlighted games for the year. So 11 a.m. for my mock opener and one other significant mock scheduled game, but you'll hear Mike North and some of the things he told us a month ago, the key schedule maker on the show coming up in this hour. This from Henry via email. Henry writes, Kevin, saw that you're having Sean McDonough on the show today. I know you and know you won't pass up the opportunity to ask him why he's so biased against the Caps. Let him have it, Sheehan. So we'll get to the game last night, but I wanted to start with this because Max texted me early in the game last night and suggested that maybe fans believe that Sean McDonough, I think you sent me a tweet, Grant Paulson,
that I did, yes.
And others were sending me various tweets and suggested that Sean McDonough is super biased. Now, let me just tell you, I'm a massive Sean McDonough fan. I have been. Those of you who have been listening for years, I can't get enough over the years of playing his highlight of the fumbled punt in the Michigan State game about 8-9 years ago. I think he's just flat out one of the best play-by-play guys in the sport. I think he's one of the most versatile play-by-play guys in the sport. The one thing I've always really enjoyed about Sean and his calls of games is he's a little bit unique in that as a play-by-play guy, and this isn't for every play-by-play guy, and it's not for everybody out there, but he actually injects opinion into the broadcast, which for some play-by-play people, that's like a no-no. You're there to call the game, and the analyst is there for the opinion. But Sean's done that on football. He's done that, everything that he's, called over the years. I actually like it because I think he's got a very, very sharp view and opinion on almost everything that he calls. But I heard this a little bit after game one, and I then really tried to listen very carefully last night. Guys, I'm not hearing it. The Caps sucked in game one. They were horrible in the first period last night. what do you want him to do? Like, he is calling the game. He is prone to injecting some opinion into it. But once the Caps flipped the game, I didn't feel like that there was any bias. I think this is a fan thing. I used to jump on a lot of you because I didn't feel the same way. Look, I think there have been times when I felt like, the announcer's been biased in calling a game. I do think, I'm sure that I've probably said that over the years. But the worst of all time in terms of fan reaction to an announcer of one of our team's games, Troy Aikman. Nobody took more heat when he called Washington games than Troy Aikman. By the way, Philly fans felt the same way about him. Giant fans felt the same way about him. There was a built-in assumption that Troy Aikman, because he was a Cowboy, could not be objective, could not be biased, could not avoid bias. I never felt that way about Troy Aikman. In fact, I had him on the show years ago. It was before one of a game that he was calling. It was on the pregame show that I did for 13 years. And he was a guest from the booth right next to me that particular night. And I asked him about that. And he said, oh, my God. He's like, Washington, they are, Washington, Philly, and Giant fans, they can't stand me. But I get that going in. He said, the irony of that is I want Washington to be good again. He said, I remember what it was like when they were good. I want them to be good. I want these games to be much bigger games between Washington and Dallas. And I always felt, and I would say this, I heard that coming from Aikman when he did games. And look, I don't go into that thing objective either. I can be slighted just as easily as many of you. I never felt that way about Aikman, though. I always thought he was excellent as an analyst and never felt like he was a Skins, hater at all. And he told me that particular day or night that he wants the NFC East to get back to its heyday where all the teams are good. And he specifically, pointed out Washington. So, look, I'm not the Caps fan that some of you are, okay? I've admitted that over the years. It's the one team of the pro sports teams in town that I just don't have and never have had. I don't know what the reason for it is. It's probably because I'm just not a hockey guy, but I've never had this incredible Caps passion. All right. I love the NHL playoffs. I love the intensity. I stayed up last night. I had the Vegas Edmonton game on last night as I was falling asleep, but I couldn't fall asleep. Max, did you stay up and watch the Connor McDavid move the pass to Draisaitl in overtime?
It's so funny. I was in the exact same position as you. I was laying in bed. I found it. I went to overtime. I was like, all right, let me put this on my phone. And I kept, my eyes started getting a little droopy, but every time they started getting droopy, a big play would happen. So it was an electric game last night late.
So intense. And, I wasn't planning. I'm not saying that I was planning on watching Edmonton Vegas last night, but the basketball game was a one-sided beatdown last night, and there was only one game on. And I flipped it in bed, and I'm like, it's 4-4. In the third period. Let's see if this thing goes to overtime because there's nothing better. And it was such a dramatic game. So many opportunities for the game to end. And then if you haven't seen the highlight of Connor McDavid's move in overtime and then the pass to Draisaitl, who I think led the league in scoring, right? Or led the league in goals. Am I right about that? I think he did. I think that's the name that kept popping up every time I went to search to see where Ovechkin was.
I think it was Draisaitl and Nylander were the top two goal scorers.
Is Draisaitl the leading goal scorer in the postseason?
That sounds right, but I'm not.
Because I think that was his fifth playoff goal. Edmonton has won now. I think it's 6 games in a row. They were down 2-0 in their first round series. They won 4 straight, and they've won the first 2 in Vegas. Anyway, but moving back to the subject, that was a phenomenal sports drama, that game last night. Hockey in the playoffs is great. But anyway, I've never been the Caps fan that I am the Redskins or Wizards or, even Nats fan that I am. In order, Skins, Terps, Hoops, all right? 1A, and I put them in either order you want. It depends on how, on the year and the feeling. It's probably Terps basketball number one for me, followed by the Skins, followed by probably the Wizards, then Terps football, and then the Nats. It's probably that order. I'm not a big Caps fan, so maybe I'm not feeling what many of you are, but I honed in last night, periods 2 and 3, after Max texted me and a couple of other people, I saw reached out to say, wow, this guy, I didn't hear it, did not hear it. So, Henry, you're not going to get me drilling Sean McDonough for being biased because I don't hear it. I think it's a fan reaction. I think it's fan sensitivity, personally. I think he's excellent. And I thought as the game went on and the Caps turned the tables on the game, especially the way he, lauded over and over again Tom Wilson, who was outstanding in the game last night. I'm not saying that you're wrong because there's a different level of sensitivity here, because I'm not the hardcore Caps fan that many of you are. I didn't hear it, man. I just didn't. I think he's effing great at everything he does. He'll be on the show with us at 12:30. So Wilson last night, I mentioned about game one on Tuesday that even for non-hockey people, if you're a sports fan, you could watch that game and know, wow, one team was much better than the other. Regardless of what the final score was, 2-1 in overtime, one team completely dominated the action. Last night, you don't have to be a hardcore hockey person to know that Tom Wilson was incredible in that game last night. He's such a physical presence, I know, always. But he ended, the game with, an empty netter. He had in the game 2 points, that empty netter plus the assist on the Carlson goal. He had multiple hits. I saw this stat. Tell me that this is wrong. He was diving all over the ice all night long, blocking shots. And I saw statistically he was given just 2 shot blocks in the game.
Yeah, I don't know how it
seems light.
It does, because he was flying all over the place, throwing his stick around. Like, that was the big thing for the Caps MO last night, just not letting Carolina breathe at all. And anytime they tried to get the puck in front of the net or in the center of the ice, like to set up a shot, they were just throwing sticks out there, and it worked a very high percentage of the time. So 2 blocks seems really low. But Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Matt Roy, they have been like defensively. The Caps have been crazy good against Carolina. I think they had like 30+ blocked shots again for that. So that's 2 games
also
in a row.
because they're getting outshot attempted again, right? The numbers weren't in the first period. The numbers were almost 4-1. They finished 3-1 in game one.
Mm-hmm.
But then it started to really even up. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no,
I just thought that Wilson had more. Should have been credited with more block shots.
For sure. But yeah, it's just the sacrificing, like, because blocking those shots does not feel good at all.
Yeah,
especially when you're getting hit on the legs or in the calves with no padding whatsoever. It's a grind. And the Caps are showing no fear. They're playing like a playoff team right now. Like, the adjustments that they made to just, like I said, not let Carolina get any breath. Like, they stymied them on the zone entries a couple of times. Just didn't let them get the puck in front. They just weren't letting them. They weren't letting the Canes get in front of Logan Thompson and get easy looks.
Yeah, the first period though was just an extension of game one.
Absolutely.
I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this can't continue, and it didn't.
Yeah,
and it didn't. And I thought Logan Thompson was great. You
Always.
Mentioned Van Riemsdyk. That save that he had on the 2-on-1, it was literally almost a 3-on-1. Where he knocked that pass down and broke that opportunity up. There were a couple of missed big opportunities for the Caps. McDavid had I'm sorry.
Close enough.
McMichael had a goal, but then was it McMichael who missed the open net? There was an open net opportunity, or was that Beauvillier?
Yeah, it was Beauvillier. It went right to him, like he was right in front of the net, had it wide open, just couldn't
wide
lift
open.
It. Yeah, anything.
72. That's Beauvillier, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But Wilson, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the best player for the Caps on the ice last night.
Far and away. If you look at I'm a big charts guy, and there are NHL stat charts that go around after every game, and his bar was way bigger than anybody else's in terms of contribution.
Send me what the charts
I'll
look
send
like.
you the NHL
I want to look at a
stat card.
chart. Yeah. So good win. I don't know what it'll look like tomorrow night. These games tend to kind of feel like their own entities. I did think that some of the conversation we had after game one with Joe B and others, Emily Kaplan, who was on with us the other day, that the Caps did use Carolina's, aggressiveness against them. Certainly, I think the first goal had something to do with that. The Connor McMichael goal. He's played very well in the postseason. I did want to ask you something because one of the things that Sean McDonough and Ferraro pointed out towards the end of the game, I'm assuming this is the reason. Ovechkin with a 2-1 lead isn't on the ice because of defense, correct?
Correct. A lot of the times when he's out there, he's kind of hiding whether it be on the wall or by the bench or on the blue line. He's hunting for scoring chances. He is not doing a lot that needs to be done on the defensive end, which, I mean, he's 39. And who knows? He might be a little bit older than 39 because who knows about Russian birth certificates, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, so it's just him. His age is showing, and then it's against a really, really fast and quick Carolina team. So it makes sense that he wasn't out there.
All right, 1-1 going back to
1-1,
Carolina.
baby.
Who knows what'll happen? But a good game, not as exciting and not as wide open as that game last night between Edmonton and Vegas. But good win for the Caps. And again, on the Sean McDonough thing, I really kind of honed in for those final two periods. For the back half of the first period after Max texted me. And guys, I'm not hearing it. Honestly, I think this is a Aikman situation where it's just a little bit too hypersensitive. I'm not sure why you would think that he'd be overly positive towards Washington in his call of the game after the way they played in game one and played the first period last night. I think he's just calling it as he sees it. Although, again, I do admit, and it's one of the things I actually like about Sean McDonough, is that he does, more so than a lot of play-by-play guys, he does inject opinion into the calls of games. He does it football, basketball, hockey. I kind of like that. It's, some would say it's a bit of a no-no for a play-by-play guy. I think a lot of those rules are way, sort of old and outdated. Just like, if you're a member of the media, you can't cheer at a game. Look, if you're there as a member of the media working, sitting in the press box, that's one thing. If you're a member of the media and you're there as a fan, you can do whatever you want. All right. When we come back, we're going to get into some schedule talk. So at 11 a.m., I am going to give you my mock schedule season opener and one other significant Washington game. But the lead up to that is to go back about a month when we had Mike North, who is one of the key people in the NFL office responsible for putting the schedule together. There's so much that he said that, is worth listening to in advance of the schedule coming out next week. But what you're going to see between now and Wednesday, you're going to see a lot of leaks. He spoke to that. And you're going to see official announcements beginning Monday morning from the league itself. So you'll hear some of what Mike North told us a month ago when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're also free and live on the Odyssey app. things. Number one, the Knicks-Celtics game tomorrow at Madison Square Garden, 3:30 tip, may be the biggest game in the Knicks' recent history. Playoff tickets just to get in on the aftermarket, $650 just to get into the arena in the upper levels. Tickets are thousands and thousands of dollars a piece. This is equivalent to some of the biggest sporting events of the year. You know, we talked about how the Garden will be insane tomorrow afternoon. The ticket prices are insane. It's going to be, I think, a worthwhile watch, even if you're not an NBA fan, just to see how lit this crowd will be. The Knicks have a 2-0 series lead. There was just one NBA playoff game last night. No Steph Curry for the Warriors meant a disaster. I mean, honestly, there was a point in that game. I think, it started during one of the in-between periods for the Caps, but it was 13-0 Minnesota and like 5 minutes had elapsed. I was wondering if Golden State could even possibly get to 50 points in the game. They got to 93, but they lost by 24. It was actually competitive at one point in the second half, but Draymond Green got hit with a dead ball technical foul. There was 8:46 to go in the second quarter. Naz Reid, who's playing very well for Minnesota, fouled Draymond Green, and Green then flailed his arms and his left arm, knocked into Naz Reid's head. Reid fell to the floor. They went to the monitor. Reid was called for a personal foul, which was accurate. And then Draymond Green, was assessed a dead ball technical after the review, which I thought was also the right call. He is now 2 technicals short of receiving an automatic 1-game suspension. Draymond Green then was very lucky that he didn't get teed up again with a technical foul, because he argued for a while. Steph Curry had to come out and kind of talk to him. The coaching staff was out there trying to pull him back. This is what he said after the game.
I'm not an angry black man. I'm a very successful, educated black man with a great family. And I'm great at basketball. I'm great at what I do. The agenda to try to keep making me look like an angry black man is crazy. I'm sick of it. It's ridiculous.
So he thinks the agenda is to make him look like an angry black man. And, Jimmy Butler agreed with him after the game, saying his reputation often leads to calls going against him, but said he isn't worried about Green because he knows how close he is to suspension and he can get it together. Now, Butler didn't exactly agree with him, just said that, he thinks the rep is part of it. So, look, I've watched a lot of Draymond Green over the years. He is a brilliant basketball player. He is, I think, a Hall of Famer. I think he'll eventually be in the Hall of Fame. If he's not in the Hall of Fame, it's all of the other stuff that got in the way. I also find him to be incredibly engaging, charismatic. If you've ever listened to him interviewed, or that podcast that he was a part of, he's exceptional in a lot of ways. But he's also, in the midst of competition, and we all know people like this, he's emotionally unstable. He can get to a point where he is incapable of calming himself down and walking away. Last night, whether it was intentional or not, by rule, that was a dead ball technical foul. He flailed his left arm. It hit Naz Reid in the head. Whether it was intentional or not, that was the right call. Very lucky, and has been very lucky over the years, in my opinion, in watching him, that he hasn't been teed up, at a 4-to-1 ratio over the amount that he's actually been teed up at. He argues and gets away with a longer period of arguing with referees than I think any player I've ever seen in the history of the league. Now, eventually they get him, but it takes an awful lot for him to get teed up versus another player. That's where they've gotten to. He is so emotionally unstable at times that the referees actually take that into consideration and don't tee him up. Many times when he should be teed up. He should have been tossed last night after he was given the dead ball technical, and his constant berating. He was stalking referees. Steph Curry had to come out. The assistant coaches had to come out. It's funny to watch Steve Kerr with him, man. Steve just looks at him and says, get get to the bench, and then turns. He doesn't grab him. He doesn't. I don't know the relationship.
They cut to Steve at one point, and he had like Jim face from The Office, just like
yeah, exactly. It was total Jim Halpert face, and I don't get it. I don't know why. I know that they've tried to get him help over the years, and he's sought it out himself. He's just incapable. And at 35, 36 years old now, he's not going to change. Let's see if he can keep it together, because with no Steph Curry, and Tim Legler was on with us yesterday, he's going to be calling the next two games in that series for ESPN, games 3 and 4 on Saturday night and on Monday night. And he said they've got to steal one without Steph and hope that they're only down 3-2 when he comes back for a game 6. They can't steal one at home without Draymond Green being a part of it. They just can't. So we'll see what happens. But an interesting and very emotional night for Draymond Green. I think we've said that about him many times. That series, the first 2 games, I'll tell you who's not playing well is the guy that many have dubbed like the next Jordan. Anthony Edwards is exceptional as a talent. There's no doubt about it. But he's looked very off in this series. They just didn't need a whole hell of a lot last night. All right. So the schedule comes out next week officially on Wednesday. We'll know, all 17 games, dates, times, networks, the whole 9 yards next Wednesday. But for those of you unfamiliar, for now going on close to 20 years, I don't know if it's 20. It's close to 20 years. I've been doing a mock schedule every year for Washington. Now everybody does them. When I first started, I don't think anybody did them. Not that people ripped me off, because I don't think that's what happened at all. But no one was doing them, and I got mocked for doing them, and I still do, and it's fine. That's part of the, it's basically a bit here that I've done over the many years of doing radio here. And I don't know why I started to do it, other than to say that I think I was doing it even before I did it on radio. I would always just kind of map out what Washington's schedule would be, usually in hopes of seeing a lot of primetime games, Monday nighters against the Cowboys, etc. Anyway, I will have my mock schedule, season opener and another significant game in 25 minutes at 11 a.m. And then on my podcast this weekend, I'll put it out, and I'll have it on radio on Monday as well on the show. So, and one of the reasons I've got to do it that way is because starting on Monday, we're going to have official announcements on the games, and I don't want to cheat. I want this to be a mock schedule that I put together without any insight. Now, there is a leak out there that many of you think is accurate. I don't know if it is or isn't, but I will tell you about that at 11 a.m. So anyway, Mike North, who has been one of the key people involved in putting the NFL schedule together for the league office, he joined me on the show back in mid-April. It was April 16th, so not exactly a month ago, but almost a month ago. He's the VP of programming development for the NFL, broadcast planning, VP of broadcast planning for the NFL. He was an excellent guest on the show. I don't know why I hadn't had him on before, but he's great. He's been one of the key parts of the schedule making team. So there was a lot that came out of that, and I thought we should revisit some of it because it is interesting. And I know a lot of you now are starting to get excited about the schedule, much more so than maybe you used to, because the NFL's made a big deal out of it. And oh, by the way, for the first time in forever, like, this is going to be a schedule that is going to feature a lot of massive high-profile games for our team. So there are a few sound bites that I want to play from that conversation that I had with Mike North back on April 16th. So the first sound bite you're going to hear is he had said to me that, there are 272 games a year, and they have this, big kind of grid, and they got to put them all in different spots. And he said, but every year there are 10 to 20 games that are obvious that they have to put in high profile spots. They've got to put on, Sunday night football, Monday night football, opening night, Thursday nights, Black Friday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the international games, etc. And I asked him, I said, with Washington being a legitimate contender again after all of the years of not being, I said, how different is the view in putting together Washington's schedule this year? Here's what he said.
Very, very different. And honestly, as somebody who's been with the league for a long time, grew up on the East Coast, when we were growing up, the Redskins were a thing. And yes, it's been a while, but I don't think we'll see what happens. I don't think that fan base left. I think it's just kind of lying dormant. So now that they're competitive again, an NFC Championship game appearance, I don't think there's any question you're going to find the Commanders all over the national television schedule. And they've got a great schedule. You think about not only all those NFC East games, obviously every year those matters, but you play a Detroit, you play a Kansas City, you play Chicago and Green Bay. Like, there's a lot of really good games on the Commanders schedule. So, yeah, whereas in previous years, maybe a lot of Sunday 1 o'clock starts in the Beltway, that's probably not what's going to happen this year. I think you're going to see a real challenge for Coach Quinn and the team. We're going to be out of our routine playing a lot of Sunday nights, some Monday nights, some Thursdays. Got to be in the mix for kickoff in Philadelphia. Got to be in the mix again for Thanksgiving in Dallas. There's going to be all kinds of places where we're going to see Commanders games this year.
So much different than it's been, obviously. We all understand that. Not only were they a 12-win team that got to the NFC Championship game, they have one of the league's superstar quarterbacks. And that combination means they are going to be profiled in high, leverage spots schedule-wise all season long. As we've been saying, get ready for some late nights because there are going to be a bunch of them. I asked them specifically about the opener in Philadelphia, where the defending champs open up every year in the first game. They call it the kickoff game. This will be on September 4th, I think, of the upcoming fall. This is what he said about that particular game. Thursday night, September 4th, the defending champion Eagles will play host to somebody. Is a perceived quality opponent, Mike, an attractive matchup between Philly and another good team or perceived good team? Is it necessary? Meaning, it's the first game of the year. Everybody's going to watch no matter who's playing in it.
It's a great question. I mean, I think you've kind of seen we've done it both ways in recent years. You remember a couple of years ago, we put Detroit in there off of their first winning season in a long time. They had knocked off, I think they knocked off the Packers, right?
Last game of the year,
Yep. So they kind of played their way into that window. It maybe wasn't one of the top 10 or top 20 games of the season, you wouldn't think. But, man, Detroit went in there, gave them all they could handle, got out of there with a win, and sort of propelled themselves onto this, new perception of Detroit where they're an NFC mainstay. So there's teams that kind of play their way into that position, but you can't go wrong with a mainstay. Like you said, you put Baltimore, Kansas City last year into that window, and it came down to the very end with the kid's toe on the white in the back of the end zone. And, you got 28 million people watching. So, there's probably a floor to what that window could do. And I think we're going to want to put, a game in there that our fans are going to care about. But I'm not sure we've really tested the ceiling of what that window could be. And as you look at the Eagles' home schedule this year, it's spectacular. I could make a case literally for every single game on their schedule. Right. And obviously Washington would be one of them. I mean, the last time we saw these two teams play, it was a 30, 40-point blowout in the championship game. But like we said, you add Debo, you add some pieces on the line. Jaden's got another year, got a full off season. Who knows? Maybe Washington-Philly's a great window for that game in week one, and everybody can be excited about it for the next 4 months. But I could make the same case for Chicago, a Bears-Eagles game there with Caleb and the coach who probably could have had any job he wanted, and he chose Chicago, and he chose to go work with the kid, and they've added some pieces to their offensive line. Denver coming off a playoff, Dallas getting their quarterback with a new coach. Detroit would be fun, the two best, arguably, teams in the conference last year. I can make a case for literally almost every game on their schedule. The Rams have earned it. I mean, you can make a case for every single game. It's less about that one game and more about the trickle-down effect on the rest of the Eagles schedule, the rest of the Sunday night NBC schedule, the rest of the week one schedule. It's not just about checking one box. It's about checking a lot of boxes.
Interesting stuff about that game. That game has featured, like last year, a rematch of the AFC Championship game, the Ravens at the Chiefs. And the year before that, the Lions, who nobody knew would end up being a good team, they were the opponent for the Chiefs. The year before that, it was Bills-Rams, really good matchup in the kickoff game. The Rams were the defending champs. The year before that, the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. The Cowboys hadn't done much in the postseason. Houston was involved in the 2020 game. You can go back. It's not always the perceived high-profile matchup. That's a real hard part of, I'm sure, what he discussed. Like, there's this trickle-down effect. Like, if you put Washington in that game, well, maybe you're missing out on a Washington-Philly Sunday night or Monday night game that would do a massive number in October or November, when, you'd be wasting it. Fox is probably going to protect one of the Washington-Philadelphia games and put it as a 425, lead game doubleheader-wise on a Sunday. I'm guessing that will happen. But that was him on the opener in Philly. I asked him about just Thanksgiving. I mean, we know that Washington and Dallas have played a lot on Thanksgiving over the years. This is what he said about that.
Maybe with Thanksgiving, a Redskins-Cowboys game on Thanksgiving, as the Thanksgiving tradition has continued to grow, that's where we capture a lot of casual fans. I think I saw a stat somewhere where, 8 to 10% of NFL fans watch their first game of the year on Thanksgiving.
Wow.
So you're with the family, the television's on, it's the Cowboys year after year, and felt like for a long time it was a constant, Redskins Cowboys just felt natural. Now, you put a Redskins Cowboys game on Thanksgiving. I think we're still holding 42 million from a couple of years ago when that game was on. And that was before, the Commanders became, what the Commanders are now. And you add Debo and you add all these interesting pieces, a Commanders Cowboys game on Thanksgiving, you got to think is looking at, the most watched regular season game ever for the NFL. But is that the best use of that asset? You could put it on a Sunday afternoon on Fox and probably get 30, 35 million. You could, like we said, have the Commanders in kickoff. You can have them on Thanksgiving. You can have them on Black Friday. You can have them on Christmas. You can have them in Madrid and have them go over and play Miami. There's so many ways to dole out these 17 Commanders games, a lot more options than we've had.
So I know a lot of you think, well, this is an obvious game in the upcoming season, Washington at Dallas on Thanksgiving. And he said it might be the all-time record number. The 2016 game, for several years, when Dak was a rookie, they were 9-1. Washington was 6-3-1. They had just absolutely pounded Green Bay on Sunday Night Football. That, for I think 5 or 6 years, was the most watched regular season game in NFL history, and I think that's the game he was referring to. But I think
in either Brazil or Spain this year.
Hello, what are you playing there?
It is.
Hey, Max, you there?
I'm here. We're good.
Yeah. So hold off on that.
Yeah,
that
my
next
fault.
one.
That's my fault.
Yeah, no worries. What was I saying? Thanksgiving, the Giants-Cowboys game last year did a massive number, and the Giants sucked. That's where the NFL and the schedule makers, it's interesting because opening night, people are going to watch. Thanksgiving, people are going to watch. I thought that was an interesting stat he gave. 8 to 9% of NFL fans watch their first game on Thanksgiving Day. So there's no guarantee of Washington and Dallas on Thanksgiving Day. And then this is what he said specific to the 2 international opportunities that Washington has. Washington has the Chargers as a road opponent. The Chargers will host the game on Friday night, September 5th from Brazil. And then they also have the Dolphins as a road opponent. The Dolphins have the first ever game in Madrid. So I asked him about the opportunities for those 2 spots.
All right. What are the chances Washington plays in either Brazil or Spain this year?
It is definitely a possibility. Personal opinion, I like them for kickoff better than I like them for Brazil in week 1, but obviously not my decision. Spain would be pretty interesting, kind of right in the middle of the season. It might cost you Thanksgiving, which is something we're going to have to think about. If you play the Spain game in week 11, let's say, and then Washington comes home to the bye in week 12 after Madrid, then you probably can't turn around and play on Thursday in Dallas on Thanksgiving. So is that the right thing? What would go into Thanksgiving instead? They're not even guaranteed their bye coming back from Madrid. We've got so many international games now, some of them early, some of them late. You can't give everybody their byes after international games. So do you go to Madrid, come back to a home game, and then quickly get on the road for a short week in Dallas on Thanksgiving? I don't know if that's the best way to, set up the Commander schedule. So are they in the mix for both Brazil and Madrid? Absolutely, yes. Are they in the mix for kickoff? Yes. Are they in the mix for Thanksgiving? Yes. Are they in the mix for Christmas? Yes. We're not going to be able to do all those things. So we're really just going to come down, like we said, to vanilla, chocolate, strawberry at the end. This one's got the Commanders in kickoff, so they're not in Brazil. This one's got them in Madrid, so they're not on Thanksgiving. This one's got them on Thanksgiving, so they're not on Christmas. This one's got them on Christmas, so they're going to play 2 short week Thursdays. They're all going to be a little different. I love the flexibility. I love the optionality. As you said at the beginning, this is probably something we haven't really had with Washington games for, decades, really. So this is exciting for us. It makes all the NFC East games more interesting. The NFC East crosses into the NFC North, so that'll be fun this year. There's a lot of really good games. No question the Commanders are going to find themselves in some pretty prominent windows.
So that answer was very interesting. So I don't think they're, going to be in the mix for Brazil. I don't. And by the way, I think that's better for Washington. If they're going to play an international game against the Chargers or Dolphins, have it against the Dolphins in Madrid, because the Chargers don't have a home field advantage. So you're basically taking 2 road games of your 9 and making them neutral site games. Miami would have a home field advantage more so than the Chargers would. The NFC plays 9 road games this year. It's very possible Washington's going to have 2 of them where they're either the favored team crowd-wise or it's neutral at best. But what he said in that answer, and I have talked to just a couple of people. I'm not learning anything specific to the schedule. But I think it's interesting. Teams aren't guaranteed their bye weeks off international games anymore. There are just too many international games to guarantee it. We've seen it the last few years. Teams, in some cases, teams don't necessarily want their bye week coming back from an international game. There are other ways to give Washington an extra day or so coming off an international game. They could play them on Monday night coming back from an international game the following week. But what you did hear him say is that it's probably an either or, Madrid or Thanksgiving, not both. And I know a lot of you, based on one of the leaks last night, said it's Madrid bye week Thanksgiving. I don't think that's going to happen. I could be wrong. I don't know for sure. But I think what I learned there from him is it's either or. They're either going to have that international game or they're going to play on Thanksgiving. And I think the way it shapes up is if they end up playing in Madrid, they don't play Thanksgiving, but they play Christmas Day. Because I think they're going to be on one of the 2 holidays for sure. All right. There were a couple of other things that he said about the schedule that I wanted to play for you. I asked him about the opponent on Washington's schedule, and it's a good one this year that stands out the most. You'll hear that. You'll also hear, how many primetime games are allowed. We'll get to that from Mike North, VP of Program Development for the NFL. He was on the show about a month ago talking about the NFL schedule, which comes out next week. We'll get to that, and then I'll give you my mock season opener and another game from the schedule that I put together at 11 a.m. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also now on the Team 980 YouTube page streaming. When you get there, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button for us.
All right, the Caps get their lick back against Carolina to tie the series 1-1. Connor McMichael opened the scoring with a breakaway, and John Carlson put the Caps up 2-0. Tom Wilson buried the empty netter to seal the victory. Caps win 3-1. The Oilers take down the Golden Knights in overtime. Connor McDavid with a silky pass to Leon Draisaitl to ice the game. Oilers win 5-4. The Timberwolves, put a beatdown on the Golden State Warriors minus Steph Curry. They won 117-93. Julius Randle had 24 points, 7 rebounds, and 11 assists. The Washington Nationals will take on the St. Louis Cardinals tonight. Mitchell Parker expected to be on the bump, and Nats on Deck starts at 6:15 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
All right, a little bit more of Mike North, the VP of Program Development for the NFL, who came on the show a month ago and talked about the schedule making. He's one of the key guys in the schedule making process for the NFL. Coming up in about 10 minutes, I'm going to give you my season mock opener for Washington and one other key game. I've completed my mock schedule. It's done. I actually shared it with somebody yesterday afternoon in the event that games got leaked, just so that that person could back me up on what I had before the leaks came out. But you're going to hear what he said about the leaks here in a moment. But this is what he said about the opponent that stands out the most on Washington's schedule this year. What was the opponent on their schedule that stood out to you the most?
This year for coming up?
Yep.
Obviously the division games matter a lot. I'm just not sure, you've got 6 of them every year. I mean, those are, I don't want to say commonplace, but hard to say one of those stands out. I would probably look at I'd probably look at Kansas City, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the last time the Commanders went out to Kansas City. It was probably 8 years ago, would be my guess, just by rotation. And it was probably a 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon game that was available in 15
they
or 20
played. Actually, they played Monday night. They played Monday night.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
I do remember that. A perfect opportunity to do that, run it back again. But it could also be a Sunday night game. It could be a Thursday night game. It could be, one of those Sunday afternoon 4:25 games. Save it for later in the season. You think both teams are going to be competitive. A Commanders Chiefs game down the stretch, Jaden and Mahomes, playoff spots on the line, Sunday afternoon, 4:30. It's kind of cold in the Northeast, so everybody's staying home and watching TV anyway. That sounds like 28, 30, 32 million people watching that game. I think that would be a really that would be a fun one. But obviously the Dallas games are going to matter. I don't remember the last time you've been to Lambeau, but we're going out to Lambeau this year. Certainly the return trip to Philly, on the championship game rematch. There's a bunch. It's going to be a really fun year. But if I had to pick one, I'm probably looking at Kansas City.
Yeah, that Kansas City game, a Mahomes Jaden Daniels matchup at Arrowhead, there are a lot of possibilities for that one. This is what he said just on the I asked him if there's a max amount you can be in prime time. This is what he said. Is there a max of prime time or standalone spots?
There's not a max of standalone spots just because we have so many more than we've ever had before. And as we think about primetime games, it's really more about, what's right for the fan. Like if we were going to schedule the Commanders in 5 or 6 primetime games, they probably shouldn't all be at home, right? I'm not sure that's the right thing to do to ask the fans to come out at night over and over and over again. Same thing competitively on the road. They shouldn't all be on the road. The coach isn't going to want to play road Sunday night, road Monday night, road Thursday night, week after week. So going to have to balance between the competitive impact of the primetime games and the fan friendliness of moving the games to primetime. Again, I think this is something where the competitiveness of the team, the record, the upward trajectory, if you will, buys us a little bit of cover. I don't think the fans are going to really scream and yell when they see a few home primetime games because the team has earned it. So it's 6 or so, 7 maybe as a result of flex, but got to balance them between home and away. Want to be fair competitively and also want to do right by the fans.
Mike North, who was on with me in mid-April. He's the VP of Broadcast Planning for the NFL, talking about the schedule and Washington's schedule specifically, which will be out officially in full on Wednesday. When we come back, you'll hear him talk about the leaks that come out a few days before the schedule release. That's become a bit of a cottage industry here in recent years. And there was a big Washington leak last night. You'll hear what he said about the validity of these leaks at this point in the process. And then I'll have my mock season opener and one other game that I've mocked out. The whole thing will be out over the weekend. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. All right. My mock schedule season opener and another high profile game coming up here in a couple of minutes. I did want to play one more soundbite from my conversation last month with Mike North. Mike is the VP of broadcast planning for the NFL and one of the key members of the NFL schedule making team. I asked him about kind of the leaks that have, sprung. I mean, there are Twitter accounts, websites dedicated to, this NFL schedule release. It's become a bit of a cottage industry on its own. And in recent years, if you've followed a lot of the leaks, most of them are actually inaccurate. And there was a big leak last night that many of you took and ran with, and it might be true. I had multiple people in my life say, actually, this guy that leaked this, he's been right more than he's been wrong. But I want you to hear what Mike North said about the days leading up to the schedule release and all of the leaks that come out.
All well and good, and love that people care and love that there's interest, but literally anybody who thinks they know anything about a game or the schedule or a team schedule is fake news. I mean, there's just literally nothing locked in yet. And oh, by the way, none of this gets approved until the boss says it's approved. So if we're looking at a, May 13, 14, 15 or so time frame to release the schedule, kind of where we've been these last few years, right. Second week in May, that means, Monday morning, the 12th, whatever that is, Monday, May 12th, we're in Commissioner Goodell's office, let the computers run all weekend, probably have a nice long Zoom call on Mother's Day night. Everybody loves that. But then come in Monday morning with, here's some great options, Commish. Here's one that has Washington, Philly for kickoff. Here's one that has Detroit, Philly for kickoff. Here's one that has Denver, Philly for kickoff. They're all great. They're all slightly different, obviously. So it's not really like this one's better than that one. It's almost more like ice cream flavors at that point. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, they're all delicious, Commissioner. Got to pick one and put it out at some point. You give us another month, we'll find you a few more flavors. Here's a Rocky Road, here's a Pralines and Cream. They're all great by that point, I hope. And I hope we've met with him enough along the way that we're not surprising him with anything. And those targets that he thinks we cannot miss on, we've hit. So now it's just kind of on the margins. And is this one a little better for Washington? If so, it's a little worse for Philly. Is this one a little better for CBS? If so, it's a little worse for Fox. And just kind of try to find that balance, thread that needle, and pick a winner. Anybody who thinks they know what the commissioner is going to say is definitely, not a chance.
There you go. That was from the horse's mouth, from the schedule makers themselves. They may not even have at this point it finalized until the commissioner looks at it. Sometimes it's the Monday morning after Mother's Day or Mother's Day night on a conference call. So take that for what it's worth. Doesn't mean that some of the leaks that have come out on the schedule, and there have been a few of them so far, the leaks that have come out have been some of the international games, and one of those is Washington at Miami, which many of you took and ran with as fact. I don't know that it is. I would imagine that there's, a chance, and I will share with you what I think of that specific opportunity here in a moment. So I do this every year. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's a bit, and many of you like it. Many of you think it's stupid. I think, it's something that I would do, whether I was doing it on the show or not. For nearly 20 years, I've been doing a mock Washington schedule. I'll have on my podcast tomorrow my entire mock schedule out, and I will then go through it on Monday on the show. But on the radio show today, I'm going to give you my mock season opener and another high-profile game. I was going to do it all on Monday, but the league announced yesterday that on Monday morning, they're going to start releasing some of the games. And unlike in previous years, more likely than not, Washington's going to be mentioned a couple of times officially before the actual schedule comes out in its entirety on Wednesday. So let's start with my mock season opener. So there's a lot about the schedule this year, and I'll repeat this on Monday. 17 games over 18 weeks. Everybody understands that. This is the year that the NFC plays 8 at home, 9 on the road. In considering Washington's, season opener, 4 years in a row until last year, they had opened at home. 2020, Philadelphia, 2021, the Chargers, 2022, Jacksonville, 2023, Arizona. They had 4 straight home games in their season opener before last year switched to a road game at Tampa. I don't know that that's a big factor in the schedule creation. I just have a feeling that it'll even out a little bit. And so I think Washington opens up on the road. And part of it, too, is just looking at the Thursday night opportunity. Let me just tell you, I don't have Washington opening up at Philadelphia in the season opener on September 4th. I think there are bigger opportunities for Washington, Philadelphia times 2 this year. And the NFL schedule makers may see it that way. It would be a massive game. Don't get it, a rematch of the NFC Championship game. Last year was a rematch of the AFC title game between Baltimore and KC. But Philadelphia's got a lot of possibilities that are really good at home and that don't necessarily use up a massive game for either Fox or NBC or potentially even, Monday Night Football on ESPN, ABC. I think Philadelphia is going to end up opening at home against somebody like the Rams, a rematch from that snow game. Maybe somebody like Chicago with Ben Johnson and his first game. I don't think it's going to be Washington. This is mock. This is a hunch. Just so everybody understands, I think the most I've ever gotten right is 4, and then the second most I've ever gotten right is 2, and that's only happened a couple of times. Getting 1 right is success. But I've got Washington still on opening weekend in a very high-profile spot. And I went back and forth with 2 potential opponents on Sunday Night Football, September 7th. The biggest game in terms of the biggest audience size is Sunday night more than Monday night. Now, the Thursday night game will be massive, the opener. But again, I think that they will save Washington, Philly times 2 for other high-profile spots because they can get away with putting almost anybody against Philadelphia on opening night and getting a massive audience. But I do think that Washington and Jaden Daniels open up on Sunday Night Football. And because I'm leaning more of a road game because they had 4 home in a row before playing on the road last year, it was a choice between what would be an amazing Sunday night opener at Arrowhead against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs and a traditional staple high-profile game in the history of NFL schedule making, Washington and Dallas. I think Kansas City and Washington is a high-profile opportunity. I went with Dallas on the road Sunday Night Football for Washington's season opener. For one, Dallas has kind of, occupied that Sunday night NBC spot on opening weekend many times over the years. Not every year, but more times than any other team. Washington and Dallas have played on Sunday Night Football a bunch against each other. Jaden Daniels, Washington at Dallas, Sunday Night Football, September 7th. That is my mock Washington season opening game. It was a coin flip between that and Kansas City, but I think Kansas City is going to be desired by a lot of the networks. NBC for sure. And it doesn't mean that I won't have Washington at Kansas City in a Sunday night game later on in the season. But a Thursday night Washington, Kansas City, a Monday night, a Sunday afternoon, 4:25 on CBS. I guarantee you CBS would love to have Washington and Kansas City as a high-profile, standalone doubleheader game at some point, maybe in November during sweeps period, ratings sweeps period. I went with Dallas, Washington at Dallas as my season opener on Sunday Night Football, September 7th. So that leads me to my other high-profile game. Now, I swear to you on my children that this was done yesterday before any leaks came out. And if I need proof of that, one of my very best friends in life will jump on and attest to it, because I shared this with him yesterday in a conversation. Because he said, when do you do that dumb mock schedule bit that you do? And I said, actually, I just finished it. And he said, well, what were the big things? And I said, there was a big challenge for me between Madrid or Thanksgiving. To me, and we played the soundbite from Mike North last hour. Mike North from the NFL schedule making office suggested and implied that Washington, more likely than not, would not get Madrid and Thanksgiving. It would be an either or situation. Does that mean it's etched in stone? No. But I'm going to go with it and say that he was giving us a clue that it was either going to be Thanksgiving against the Cowboys. And by the way, Thanksgiving could mean the Thanksgiving night game as well against somebody else. But it was either going to be Thanksgiving or it was going to be Madrid. And to me, it was a Madrid and Christmas Day versus no Madrid, no Christmas Day, but Thanksgiving Day. And I went with swearing on my children that this was out before any of the leaks, and we don't even know if the leaks are true. I had mocked Washington to Madrid to face the Miami Dolphins on November 16th in a game that would start at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. In part because I really want it to be true, because I would love to go to that game. That's a game that I think I'm going to try to find a way to go to if I'm able to. There's no guarantee I can, but Madrid is a great city. They've never hosted an NFL game. And for the first game in Madrid to put Washington and Jaden Daniels in that city, that was a game that I mocked. Swear to God on my kids that I had mocked this before some people on the internet leaked it last night. And again, I played the Mike North soundbite because he said everything that comes out right now is fake news. So it may not even be true. But I went with it. I might be right. I might be wrong. But I mocked Washington to Madrid to face Miami, which means, based on my belief, based on what Mike North said, another clue as to what I'll have on my mock, that they're not playing on Thanksgiving, but they'll end up playing on Christmas Day. So there you go. At Dallas, Sunday Night Football, September 7th, as the season opener, and November 16th in Madrid against the Miami Dolphins, 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Those are the two games I'm giving out to you, but you've also learned that I'm not going to have them on Thanksgiving, but I am going to have them on Christmas Day in my mock schedule. I'm going to try to not pay attention to any of the leaks that come out. I promise you I will not alter my mock schedule to include any of the leaks, because I don't know that the leaks are true. And Mike North said it's fake news. Nobody knows for sure until at least Monday, when the commissioner comes in and puts his blessing on all of it. So there you go. Those are the two games. Now, something that we've done in the past, we'll do again. And I'm gonna focus on opening night and ask all of you, do you want Washington to open up on September 4th, Thursday night, kickoff game in Philadelphia against the defending champs when they raise a banner or whatever they do? Do you want that game or not? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you want to add anything else, you can get one other, hunch or thing that you'd like to see on Washington's schedule, but that's it. I don't want your mock schedule. I don't want your 4 or 5 primetime games. I want a yes or no on whether or not you want Washington to open in the season opener at Philadelphia on Thursday Night Football, September 4th. Yes or no on that. And then you can give me one other thing that you'd like to see or one other hunch that you have. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. If you've been thinking about new windows, my recommendation is always is Window Nation. If you've got older windows, you should be preparing for the summer heat with energy-efficient windows from Window Nation. Their windows are built to keep your house cool during hot summer days. Window Nation has some of the best energy-efficient windows out there. Their windows frequently outperform and outlast ones from the expensive guys, and their windows are assembled right here in the United States. Make a smart investment now, and you could save money for many years to come. Window Nation offers a lifetime warranty on all their windows. You can save long into the future. Now, the deal right now is their semi-annual deal. You get 60% off all windows. For 2 years, you don't have to pay anything. No down payment, no payments, and no interest charged for 2 years until 2027. If you purchase a house full of windows, they'll give you a free entry door with that house full of window purchase. Window Nation, you can trust. They've got an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau, 96% customer satisfaction rating, and over 20,000 five-star reviews on Google. Call them now, 866-90-NATION, or head to windownation.com. Mention my name. They'll come out and schedule a fast, free estimate. 866-90-NATION for 60% off and no payments for 2 full years with no interest charged, and a free entry door if you buy a house full of windows. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. All right. I've given out my mock season opener for Washington. It was a tough call between Kansas City on the road and on Sunday Night Football and Dallas on the road Sunday Night Football. I went with at Dallas Sunday night, September 7th, high-profile Sunday Night Football for Washington season opener. And I gave you one other game, swearing on my kids that this was out before any of the leaks late, last evening, et cetera, and we don't even know if they're true, but I did mock Washington to Madrid against Miami on November 16th. I'll have my entire mock schedule out on my podcast tomorrow, and then I'll have the entirety of it on the radio show as well on Monday, but I need to get it out before Monday early because some of the games are going to start to be unveiled officially by the league on Monday morning. The question here for all of you, and I'll ask Max the question and I'll answer it as well. Do you want Washington to be Philadelphia's opening night opponent, defending champs, raising a banner, or whatever the defending champs do on opening Thursday Night Football? Do you want Washington in that spot for their season opener? Yes or no? Why or why not? And then if you've got one other hunch or hope, you can give that to me. Don't call with your entire mock schedule. 301-230-0980. I also put up at Kevin Sheehan, DC on X, a poll. Do you want the season opener in Philadelphia? Yes or no, if you want to vote on that. Max, do you want them to open in Philly Thursday night, September 4th in the NFL's season opening game? Yes or no? Why or why not?
No, I do not. I do not want to see them open up in Philly just because we got our asses handed to us in the NFC Championship game, and I really would not like to relive that. But also in the NFL, the first 4 weeks have kind of become little sort of preseason-y. Like everyone's trying to get back into the flow of things, get back into game flow, just get in season shape. So I'd rather us not have to play a divisional opponent in, that kind of time period where everyone's trying to get back to it. I understand, yes, you might have a better shot at beating this team if they're kind of, lackadaisical early in the season, but I'd rather see both these teams, take each other on when they're at their best. So I want to see it a little bit later, kind of mid-ish season,
I honestly don't care one way or the other. I think I'd prefer not because, I don't know, Washington hasn't played in this game since the Giants were the defending champions in 2000 and the 2007 Giants that beat the Patriots. Washington opened up on that Thursday night in Giant Stadium against the Giants. That's the last time Washington played in that spot. There have been opportunities, a couple of opportunities, but they haven't been selected. Believe it or not, the road team in these games has played pretty well in recent years. Detroit beat the Chiefs 2 years ago. Buffalo hammered the Rams 3 years ago. Dallas nearly knocked off Tampa in 21. The last time the Eagles played in this spot, they were in a tight game against the Falcons. The Chiefs in 2017, this was not a Mahomes season. It was an Alex Smith season, blew out the Patriots in Foxborough on opening night. So the road team has played relatively well in this spot over the years. I don't know. I feel like there are going to be big opportunities for Washington and Philly, and I'd love to see that Sunday night spot that I mocked out even more so. It'd be phenomenal if it were against the Chiefs. I mocked out the Cowboys, but I don't really have a strong preference one way or the other. It's not that I would fear it like it's opening night, the place is going to be lit, the hanging the banners or, whatever they do. I just, I think Washington would have a chance going in there. But I'd rather see it a little bit later on. I think that would be my preference. 301-230-0980. All right, let's get to some calls. Yes or no on at Philly in the season opener. And then if you've got another schedule, desire, hope, or hunch, you can give me that too. Let's start with Aveen. Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, I'm no on the season opener at Philly. I want those games to be more measuring stick kind of games, one in the middle of the season, and then one at the end of the season, potentially for the division. And, hopefully the roster can settle in more. We've had a lot of turnover. I think your guess at Dallas is really good for the season opener. I thought the same exact thing for that reasoning that they love having Dallas on Sunday nights. And the one hunch, and the question I have for you is, as long as we're this team that we think we are with Jaden Daniels, I don't see us ever not having a 425 or primetime game, not having a 425 or primetime game against Dallas or Philly. I just don't see us having any 1 o'clock games against them for the foreseeable future. So just wanted to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And by the way, that was a good point that you made about the opener. Week 1 is the biggest head fake every year. And maybe that would be the opportunity to go in and steal a game at Philly. But given, there's going to be more turnover. By the way, Philly's got some turnover too in spots. It wouldn't necessarily be a valid measuring stick game. I like the way you put that, although in talking it through, it may be a better opportunity to steal that game before Philly gets into that measuring stick part of the season as well. I agree with you. I think Washington and Dallas, I think Washington and Philly, Washington and Dallas are pretty much now, set for, a primetime opportunity and a Sunday 425 opportunity. Fox is not going to, you'll hear it in my mock. I don't have 2 primetime games with Washington and Philly. That's just not going to happen. Fox is not losing, both Washington-Philadelphia games, and they're not going to lose both Washington-Dallas games. And Dallas isn't as, appealing this year in terms of the type of team that they are, but they're always a draw. And Washington-Dallas has always been a draw. Even when Washington floundered and really fell, off the face of the earth as a relevant franchise during all those years, there was still something that Washington-Dallas conjured up in the minds and hearts of NFL fans. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Saeed. Saeed, do you want them to open up in Philadelphia on the Thursday night season opener, yes or no? And then if you've got another hunch about the schedule, have at it.
Hey, Kevin. I say no, because if it is, I would call that almost like the Stephen A. Smith Bowl, because it's a useless measuring stick, meaning that if we lose, they'll say, hey, we told you they didn't close the gap. If we win, they'll be like, hey, it was Philly's first game. So there's not even a narrative that we can take with us, even look like the language you're using, which is, maybe we can go and steal. I don't want to steal this year. I really just want to go beat people or lose to people. I don't want to have that narrative. I know that Lattimore is not going to be playing a lot in the preseason with the soft tissue stuff. I don't need his first game against Brown. I don't need Jaden's first game with his kind of revamped offense being all that. So I don't need any of that because I can't do anything with that. It's just going to be Stephen A. talking about, I told you, and this is this. I don't need any of that narrative from game one. The only hunch thing is I really would love to see another Caleb versus Jaden in prime time. That would be my wish, but that's all I got for you.
Well, I think that's a possibility. Another clue on my mock schedule. I think a Jaden Caleb Williams, a Washington-Chicago rematch of the Hail Mary game just feels like a primetime game this year. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that it's the best opportunity to beat Philadelphia. It's also possible that Washington's nowhere near ready. Week 1 is always, we saw it last year with Washington's, loss, a one-sided, lopsided loss to Tampa. And then later in the season, in the postseason, Washington goes into the same building and wins when it matters. Let's go to Leo in Virginia Beach. Leo, yes or no on opening in Philadelphia on opening night, September 4th? Why or why not? And if you've got another hunch that you want to give us or hope about the schedule, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, yeah, I'm a yes for that game. You go into that game where, yes, the final score of that NFC Championship game did look a lot worse than the actual play was. Before that, I think it was McNichols' fumble on the kickoff return. It was, a 2-score game? It was a 2-score game, and Jaden's been playing well. They've had the momentum going, and that game left a horrendous taste in Jaden, Ertz, Terry, Bobby, every single one of those guys' mouths. you can go into a game with the bright lights on and have it where they're raising that championship banner, where they had to literally beat you to get to that. I think it would be a great opportunity. And I do understand the Stephen A. Smith game bowl and all that. But you take the point of you're going to need to win that game. You need to win one of those games to be able to win that division, at least one. And if you can go in there where there's a chance they have that hangover or all that, I think that would be an amazing opportunity to go in. And then for Hunt, as much as I want that Philly game, God, I would love to see Dallas or KC at opening kickoff, and I would do anything for another one of those primetime Caleb games.
Yeah. Thanks, Leo, for the call. Yeah, I going back and sort of revisiting, if not relitigating, the NFC Championship game has driven some people nuts, especially Philadelphia fans or non-Washington fans, because you know that I agree with you. And it wasn't really the McNichols fumble. It was the Eckler fumble when they were down 34-23 and driving at midfield late third quarter. They were legitimately in the game. But the final score was 55-23. And in sort of thinking about that game, I think I said it the day after, even though I don't think the score reflected how Washington moved the football offensively and had a chance, I also don't think that Washington could win that game because were never going to stop Philadelphia. Never. They were never going to stop them. If Philadelphia needed to score 70 in that game, that's what they would have scored. Joe in Springfield, yes or no to Philadelphia on opening night? Why or why not? You can give me a hunch on the schedule, 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in. Joe, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, let me make this simple for you. Absolutely not. Okay? If you want to play at Philly or Philly or at home against Philly during the season, wait till middle of the season or have them I think a couple of years ago we were having them late in the season, like 2 times in 4 weeks when it matters the most, when playoffs are on the line. You don't want to start 0-1 because Philadelphia is the better team. Let's face it, they're the defending champions. And we are good, Kevin. We proved it last year, but Philly was a better team in the division. But I do have a hunch about the first game of the season. I understand Fox wants to have some of these primetime games as well, like at 4:25. Would it be possible if Detroit comes to Washington in week 1 and we host Detroit for a playoff rematch? And it wouldn't surprise me as well if it's hosting Caleb Williams, because it's going to be Ben Johnson's first game as head coach for the Bears. And I'm sure he wants to see what Caleb Williams can do against Jaden Daniels. So I believe it either be Bears or Lions. We host them week 1. Who knows what happens? But I agree with you. Kansas City could be a possibility, and certainly at Dallas week 1. We'll see, Kevin. But I agree. We'll see what happens for sure.
Yeah. No. I'm looking at just the Twitter poll that I put up, yes or no, and a couple hundred votes in the first few minutes, and 60% don't want to see Washington open its season at Philadelphia. 40% say yes. That's the question, 301-230-0980. Plus, you can add a hunch about the schedule or a desire or a hope about the schedule. To Joe's season opener, there are lots of possibilities here. I thought about Fox wanting Washington in that 425 doubleheader, spot. But I think Sunday Night Football, other than the Thursday night game, in week 1, that Sunday night spot is a massive spot, probably the biggest spot of the weekend other than the Thursday night opener. And I just think that Dallas has, for whatever reason, been in that spot more often than not over the years. I could have put them, here against Washington, but Washington's, opened at home 4 out of the last 5 seasons. I mean, it was 4 straight years before they opened on the road last year. So that's why I went at Dallas. 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in, yes or no, on opening at Philadelphia on opening night, and then any other schedule hunch you want. Let's go to James. James is calling from New Windsor. Is that Connecticut or is that somewhere in Canada?
It's in Maryland. It's in Carroll County.
I didn't know. Thank you, James. Go ahead.
I wanted to say no for this because I prefer for them to play these divisional games later in the season, like some of the people were saying. And I think that they're going to play the first game against one of the other division winners. That's my hope.
You think they're going to play the first game against one of the other division winners? So on their schedule,
Detroit or LA, one of those teams. I think they're going to play one of those.
Yeah, the Chargers they don't have the Rams, and the Chargers were not a division winner. The Chiefs were a division winner. Detroit was a division winner. Philly obviously was a division winner. Those are the division winners that they have on the schedule this year. So,
anybody but Philly, I think that they're going to play.
Okay. Yep. And I've mocked it out similarly. I mean, is it going to shock me if they're the opening game against Philadelphia? No, it's not. And I played for you what Mike North told us. One of the schedule makers a month ago. He could certainly envision that. Washington's going to have, I think, the max of prime time 6. Now they could get flexed into something late in the year. I'm going to have them. I can tell you right now, 6 primetime games. I've already told you about. I've got them in Madrid against Miami, and I think they're going to end up playing on one of the 2 holidays. I think it's going to be Christmas Day. And the opponent, when I tell you tomorrow on my podcast, I think just would be magical to have as a Christmas Day game. 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in. Yes or no? Do you want Washington to open against Philadelphia on opening night? Let's go to Rock in Fairfax. Rock, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to say absolutely. This is one of those things where it's not only Washington fans that are looking at Jaden Daniels. The whole league and other cities are looking at him as well. What better way to go in there and go punch them in their mouth finally again? They're a Super Bowl team. They just, going to come in this fresh this year, and for us to go in there and go do something. And I know it's not about always the fans. If you look at the perception of how the players are looking at it, I know they're looking at it like this possibly. This is just my take. They're probably looking at it like, hey, AP got rid of all these bums that were out here doing nothing. Now it's our turn to go over there and do this with the pieces that we do have. And what better way to boost the morale inside of the actual locker room? My biggest hope is the Thanksgiving game or Christmas game. Thanks so much for taking my call.
Yeah, thanks, Rock. Appreciate it. Kind of split, on whether or not you want to open against Philly on the road. 301-230-0980. Philly in the opening night, Thursday night, September 4th. The game they call the kickoff game to kick off the 2025 season. Do you want Washington to be Philly's opponent on opening night? Yes or no? Why or why not? And then if you've got another hunch or another hope about Washington's schedule, you can give me that as well. 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, we are now streaming live on the Team 980's YouTube page. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button for us when you get there.
All right, ESPN's Pablo Torre is reporting that Jordan Hudson is no longer allowed in the UNC football facility. Belichick's family is also reportedly researching her background. Quote, there is deep worry for how detrimental Jordan can be, not just for North Carolina, but Bill's legacy, reputation, everything he has built and worked for decades, end quote. The Capitals get their lick back versus Carolina to tie the series at 1-1. Connor McMichael opened the scoring on a breakaway. John Carlson put the Caps up 2-0, and Tom Wilson buries the empty net goal to seal the victory, and Caps win 3-1. The Oilers take down the Golden Knights in overtime. Connor McDavid with a silky pass to get Leon Draisaitl the goal to ice the game in overtime. Oilers win 5-4. The Minnesota Timberwolves put a beat down on the Golden State Warriors minus Steph Curry, 117-93. Anthony Edwards had 20 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Julius Randle had 24, 7, and 11. The Washington Nationals will take on the St. Louis Cardinals tonight. Mitchell Parker is expected to be on the bump. Nats on deck starts at 6:15 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
All right, few more calls, 301-230-0980. Do you want Washington to open on opening night in Philadelphia against the defending champs? Yes or no, why or why not? If you want to add another schedule hunch or hope, you can do that as well, 301-230-0980. You don't have to know rugby to love it. You just have to feel it, the energy, the hits, the nonstop action. Old Glory DC brings it all. And this Tuesday night, May 13th at 6 p.m., Old Glory's bringing it to NOLA Gold under the lights at George Mason University Stadium in Fairfax. It's not just a game, it's 80 minutes of pure adrenaline, rucks, scrums, breakaway runs, a collision course on grass. And this isn't just any match, it's Military Appreciation Night, Old Glory's biggest military salute ever. All active, retired, and National Guard service members get in free with a valid military ID. Just show your ID at the gate and you're in. Got friends and family coming along? General admission tickets are just $15. That's live Major League Rugby action for less than a trip to the movies. And before kickoff, author Martin Pegler will be signing his book, Brotherhood, When West Point Rugby Went to War. So if you've never experienced live rugby, this is your shot. This Tuesday night, May 13th, 6 p.m. at George Mason. Get your tickets now at oldglorydc.com. That's oldglorydc.com. And let's scrum together. Rugby's a phenomenal game to watch live. If you like physical sports and athletic sports. All right, let's get to a few of the calls. We may not get to all of you, but let's go to Little. Little's been on hold for a while. Yes or no on Philly opening night? Go ahead.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Mad Max. I'm a little shocked. Mad Max gave that answer. No. Kevin, ex-football player. A lot of these callers can't have to play football. You got that bad taste in your mouth. I was telling Mad Max, we play the same position, safety. Yes, I want Philly off the bat. And tell you why? Because if we shut Barkley down, the league will take notice. And I think we got the potential, Kevin, this year to shut Barkley down, to shut the run down. And I'm going to tell you one other thing. When it came to Chin ran the 40 in 4.6. The kid Harris, 4.3. Kevin, we done got a little quick on the backside, man. I'm looking for a hell of a season, man. I'm talking about, man, how you look, I called it last year. I'm going to say it now. Home field advantage for that championship game. Watch what I tell you. That's all I got, big fella.
Thanks, Little.
God bless y'all. Stay up, man.
Yep. Appreciate it. That's the way to get to the Super Bowl. Win the division and have the majority, if not all, of the postseason games at home. It's not the only way to get there. Washington won 2 road games, but they didn't win 3. And you needed to win 3 to get to the Super Bowl. It'd be nice if their defense this year is better at stopping the run, because that was their major flaw last year, and it hurt them when it mattered the most. Let's go to Joe in Gaithersburg. Joe, yes or no on Philadelphia, and any other hunch or hope you have for the schedule?
No, as to Philadelphia. And I like the Commanders at Detroit opening day. I'm sorry, not opening day, Sunday, 4:25 slot. I think Detroit's a little bit embarrassed about what happened last year in the playoffs.
Yeah, they should be. They got beat 45-31. They got run out of their own building. They couldn't stop us. And then for some inexplicable reason, they stopped giving the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, who was averaging over 10 yards a carry at one point in that game. Detroit, remember, got banged up big time defensively, and they were a shell of what they were early in the season on defense. So I'm sure Detroit is going to view the trip to Washington whenever it happens as a chance for payback, no doubt. And that'll be a big game on the schedule. That's one of those games that has the possibility of being a primetime game, no worse than a Sunday 4:25, game on Fox, maybe CBS, who knows. But that's one of the high-profile games on Washington's schedule. I was looking through this before I nailed down my mock schedule yesterday. There are very few games that aren't, that don't have some attraction, I would think, to schedule makers. Like, a game at Atlanta, they play at Atlanta this year. That doesn't have a lot of, juice to it. Maybe the 2 games against the Giants don't have a lot of juice to them, in part because the Giants aren't supposed to be good, but the Giants usually draw some, more than expected primetime games because they're a marquee franchise. You've got a game at home against Vegas. Who knows how the league views that one? You've got a home game against Seattle. Seattle was certainly a decent team last year, but it's going to change a lot with Sam Darnold at quarterback. But the majority of the games, 2 against Philly, 2 against Dallas, like you mentioned, Detroit, Kansas City. They've got a game at Minnesota. We don't know what Minnesota will look like, but they won 14 games last year. You got Bo Nix coming to Landover. You got the rematch of the Hail Mary game at home. You've got the Dolphins on the road, I think, in Madrid. Chargers on the road. The Chargers are certainly going to be one of those teams picked to be a playoff team. And then you've got Green Bay at Lambeau. So there are a lot of, kind of on paper, high-profile marquee matchups on their schedule this year. And not because of the opponent only, but because of our team for the first time in a long time. Updating the Twitter poll, it's pretty much the same. 60% would prefer not to open in Philadelphia. 40% say, give it to us. Ben Standig, we'll ask him what he thinks. Plus, we will look towards the roster and whether or not there's still another decent-sized chip domino to fall between now and training camp. Ben Standig next. Sean McDonough will join us at 12:30 to talk Caps Carolina. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Sean McDonough will be with us at 12:30. We'll talk Caps, Carolina, with the lead hockey voice on ESPN and ABC, Sean McDonough, at 12:30. Joining us right now, as he does every Friday in this spot, Ben Standig from The Athletic, at Ben Standig on X, on Twitter. He's got a podcast called Last Man Standig, but you should read him on The Athletic. He's great, and he joins us right now. So before we get to some team talk, because I do have a couple of specific questions for you. You know the whole schedule, bit that I've been doing for many years. So I've given my season opener and then another game during the course of the season. Is there anything that you've kind of wanted to see? Like we just took calls for a while on whether or not fans want Washington to open at Philadelphia. Taking maybe your reporter / columnist hat off for a moment. Would you like to see the season opener at Philadelphia?
I mean, I think that would be fun. Sure. I mean, not only is it a division game, it's the Super Bowl champ gets right, that Thursday night marquee game to open the season. So that would I would put Washington there, and
that's what we're talking about, the opening game. Yeah, Philadelphia is going to host that opening game. Yep.
Yeah, and we've talked, over and over again in the last, several weeks and months about just how many different ways this is just so shocking how Washington is being viewed and how they've risen over the Snyder era, most recently getting the NFL draft. To have Washington on the premier game, the NFL opener against the Super Bowl champ, would be yet another testament to just how far things have changed here. So, yeah, I would be cool with that. I mean, I know sometimes the NFL seems like they like to have a one-off matchup as opposed to a division game necessarily. But look, I think, if you look at the NFC, I think obviously we all there's some questions about, will Washington regress? How is it going to go? Tougher schedule, so on and so on. But as it stands right now, it's not, it's not like, I guess you could say maybe the healthy Lions would maybe still be perceived as ahead of Washington, and but it's not like they're not there. So sure, why not Washington in week 1 at Philly? I'd be down with that.
Yeah. I don't really, have a strong preference one way or the other. I'm looking forward to seeing where all of these high profile games land, because there are so many opportunities for it. But that opening Thursday night game, they haven't always leaned on the most attractive matchup. Last year, they had it with the Ravens and Chiefs in the rematch of the AFC title game from the year before. But, the thought about that Thursday night game is they're going to have a massive audience no matter who's playing in it. The year before, Detroit opened at Arrowhead, and Detroit was not supposed to be, a high profile team. They kind of became that particular season, and they won the game. But anyway, all right. So there are a couple of things that I wrote down in advance of you coming on today, because I've talked about a couple of things this week. Reports. There was a report the other day on ESPN.com, part of sort of the aftermath of the draft, that Trey Amos may have fallen a little bit beyond where he was projected. But, we've talked so much about the draft, players 7 through 70, it seemed like they were kind of interchangeable. But there was some discussion that teams had learned of a back injury that he had. Do you know anything about that? And as to whether or not, it's the reason that he fell to 61?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't hear that, and I didn't hear anybody discussing that pre-draft.
Nobody did.
With Will Johnson, the Michigan corner, sliding from being a potential top 15 pick out of the first round. Like, that was a pretty clear reason as to why that occurred. So if there was something there, it seems like it must have been fairly minor or not a huge deal. Because even in the aftermath, I mean, it's not like anybody came out and said, well, now I can tell you X, Y, or Z. I mean, I know the report from ESPN is sort of doing that, but that was even after the fact of after the fact. So, yeah, I don't know too much about that beyond what was there. And, we're going to obviously be at rookie camp tomorrow, and it'll be our first chance to talk to Dan Quinn since the draft. So, presumably this is something that could come up
to ask a question and ask Trey Amos directly himself what he thinks. But I hadn't heard anything, and I don't get this. I mean, I don't get any sense that there's any issue there. But he did slip a little bit. I would also just add that the corners. When I kept looking at the mock drafts and doing my own and thinking about it, it seemed to me like they could absolutely take a corner at 30 or at 29. Sorry, but as I kept going through the process, I never could figure out, and it never sensed like one of these corners, whether it was Amos or Benjamin Morrison or the Florida State kid or some others, that like anybody was like pulled ahead into that spot. And then it played out that way where they kind of all flipped a little bit. Like, it's not like anybody went right. I mean, I don't think anybody went particularly high. So it feels like the group as a whole flipped, and I think there may be something to that. I feel like corners are one of the positions that, even though it's viewed as a bigger deal, I do kind of feel like teams are de-emphasizing it a little bit, because it's just the passing game everything is so slanted towards the offense that it's almost you'd have to have Deion Sanders and Darrell Green out there that it feels like at times to make a difference. So I do think that might be a factor with corners, but the back injury specifically, I'm unaware.
Washington's rookie minicamp opens really tomorrow to the media. We'll hear Dan Quinn talk tomorrow. The weather today sort of pushed that back to tomorrow. Just going back to the draft real quickly, because I was off on Monday, so we haven't talked since last week. Have you learned anything about, as an example, in the fourth round, was it possible that if one of those edges, 4 of them came off, I think in the 6 or 7 picks before they picked Jalen Lane, that maybe one of them could have been picked at, at 61? Was there another possibility had a player been on the board? Was there another possibility? We heard the Howie Roseman stuff, which was interesting because Adam Peters admitted that there was a chance to trade back, multiple chances to trade back, including hardly at all. And that may have been Philadelphia, who was at 32 in the moment. Just any sort of intel, here now coming up on essentially 2 weeks after the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think that edge rusher was certainly something they were looking at, but ultimately, as we discussed pre-draft, they had needs, and yet simultaneously were kind of covered everywhere should the board fall a certain way. And it would have been one thing if they had taken sort of like a position where you're like, really, why are you taking that over, in the second or fourth round when you have sort of a clear need at an edge. So, but they didn't do that, right? I mean, they absolutely need more speed on offense.
Sure.
Not to mention in the return game. So taking a guy like Lane, just makes a ton of sense. Now, sure, could they have, like you said, there was a lot of those edge guys that went off the board right before them or right around that pick, and could that have changed things? Maybe, but again, here's the thing. As much as we all talked about edge, and I'm not saying it's not an issue, but it is concerning that they didn't do this, and this will certainly be a question again to bring up to Dan Quinn tomorrow when we talk to him. But the way I look at the Connerly, the pick, the idea of an offensive tackle, I think that's something that has a chance to be a greater impact than potentially an edge guy at that spot, in terms of an offensive tackle is going to start every play, an edge guy is going to rotate. And I don't think they had to force it. There were guys you could get later. Second round, they absolutely had to get, and by the way, in the division that they're in, Micah Parsons, the Giants have Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and they were about to draft Abdul Carter, right? The Eagles, we know the depth that they have along the line. So it's an obvious something you need right off the bat there. In terms of the corners, same thing in the division, right? CeeDee Lamb, Neighbors. The Eagles have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Obviously now Dallas even has George Pickens. So they absolutely needed that. That was a clear – if they hadn't drafted a cornerback, let's just say, I think that would have been a position we'd all be going, what are they doing here? Right? I mean, you can get exposed, as we know, at that spot, and they didn't have anybody. Or they didn't have enough, I would say. I would make an argument for it. And then, again, with that speed, if they don't add a guy like Lane with his profile, sure, they added Deebo Samuel, and I'm a believer that you can find receivers, but that type of playmaking ability, that speed, that is something they just did not have. So I think all those spots were, again, maybe it's all on us. Maybe we just over-discussed the edge rusher scenario. It is still the most glaring omission of this roster that they don't have anybody young, highly athletic relative to NFL players. I mean, at that spot, and that's in a very important position. But they also were 30th against the run last year, and they clearly made a choice to go after guys that could help that. Javon Kinlaw will play some on the edge. Dietrich Wise is a better two-way player, whereas like Dante Fowler was much more of a just pure pass rusher type. So I think they made I think they did address the position, but they addressed it in terms of the run defense more than they did the pass rush. And to that end, it's not like they ignored it. It's just the way we're looking at it. They didn't get that guy. So I think if the board had gone a different way, maybe they would have done it. But I on some level, again, I'm not trying to backtrack off of, I thought they would take an edge somewhere too, but they really needed these other things as much or more for this year's roster. Long term, you got to get an edge. But for this year, I think you can make an argument that these other positions were more glaring than edge when you factor in the run defense part.
How much, just one more on kind of the draft, how much do you think it is what maybe you just described, where the board just didn't fall the way it would have needed to fall for them to take a defensive edge? Or is part of it that we are underrating or not discussing enough the possibility that they really like what they have?
Yeah, for sure. They obviously went out and signed these players. Like, look, let's be real. None of us know what Jacob Martin's all about, right? I don't know. I've read as much as everybody else has. I've looked at some of the tape. Who knows? Do they
want to tell everybody who that is?
Oh, sure. I'm one of their free agents that they signed. He had 3 sacks last year. He's the guy that maybe is you're most hopeful can give them that spark off the edge. But look, he's been a guy that's been in the league, hasn't done a ton. But look, they think, hey, with our system, with what we want to do, we can utilize him in ways that's going to free him up, especially if we get better play out of the middle with Deron Payne and Johnny Newton and now Kinlaw, and that's going to free him up for some one-on-ones, and we think this guy can take advantage. Sure, maybe. I don't know. Dorrance Armstrong's sack numbers last year were down relative to his years in Dallas. Do they think? But he played very well, right, in some of the playoff runs. So do they think, hey, maybe we figure out some better ways to use Dorrance Armstrong? That'll get us going? Perhaps. Obviously, Frankie Louvu is still a factor. And, pass rush is obviously highly important for all aspects of the defense, but, they did make moves towards the secondary to help there. So, yeah, I think that, again, I think the run defense part is probably what we're ignoring to an extent in terms of their liking of this. I imagine they're going to look at it and think Dietrich Wise is a better two-way player than the options that we had at that spot a year ago. Getting Javon Kinlaw clearly is a nod towards helping out on that run defense, being this elephant edge guy who's focused more on stopping the run than necessarily getting after the quarterback. So, yeah, I think they viewed these things as important. It's just that they didn't get, one guy. Right, Kinlaw was kind of like, really? Okay, that's interesting. Adam Peters knows this guy, but that was kind of out of the blue, especially for the contract, 3 years, $45 million. And they didn't draft somebody. So we're looking at it like, boy, they didn't get anybody that we would have figured. They obviously have a different view of it. So, yeah, I think they think it's a better group. And, again, against the run, I think it should be. But overall, we'll see. You still have to get Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott off their spots, right? So, did they do enough of that? I don't know. We can make that claim. But, again, how many of us projected what was going to happen last year to happen? So, you have to give them a little benefit of that they have a good feel. That's the thing last year, right? Other than Michael Davis, the cornerback, almost every single one of their free agent moves worked out as well as you could probably hope, or at least pretty close.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe maybe they see something in some of these guys that we just haven't yet.
You wrote today about the undrafted free agent group that they're bringing in. Just kind of recap the 8, 9, 10 players that they've brought in. By sort of telling everybody who they clearly like the most based on the guarantees that they gave. I know that's not always a dead giveaway because sometimes it's the only way to get the player in because there's demand for that player. But Who of the undrafted free agents have the best shot of making the team, and who got the biggest guaranteed money?
Sure. And I know based on like comments I get or questions I get, people are really jacked for these undrafted guys or even the rookie camp invitation guys.
Yeah.
Slow the roll on that stuff. I mean, most of the time these things don't pan out at all. But look, there were guys like last year, Tyler Owens and Colson Yankoff made the roster. In years past, Cam Sims and Danny Johnson were undrafted free agents, and neither one was like a dynamo, but they both played several years for the command for Washington in the league, and they were helpful at times. So we'll see. I think there you mentioned. Obviously, I use my guy Dane Brugler's guide because we're talking this level of player. Only a guy like crazy like Dane is going to know a lot about these guys. But Ja'Cory Brooks, the receiver from Louisville, I've mentioned I think maybe here before as well. He's a really interesting one. The receivers are always the fun watches in camp because, they can make these spectacular plays and we're watching the ball more than we're watching the line and things like that. And here the guy is sort of that classic version of that 6'2" receiver with a 5-star recruit to Alabama. Obviously Alabama always has one of the deeper rosters. In the first 2 years, he was mainly a special teams guy, was thought to maybe was on the verge of a breakout as a junior year, but then he suffered a season-ending labrum tear. He did have a blocked punt in each of his first 3 seasons with Alabama. Then he transfers to Louisville, plays with Tyler Shuck, who obviously was a second-round pick with the Saints this year, and was a first-team All-ACC selection, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, primarily playing on the outside. I think the fact that he has shown an aptitude on special teams, he can also return kicks and punts, is where I think that he's got an opportunity here because, again, if you look at that room, Terry McLaurin, Debo Samuel, Noah Brown, Michael Gallup, these guys are not typically playing on special teams. I mean, Debo did a little bit last year, but obviously, that's not really what he's going to be looking to do. So, that's a position, though, like where if you're going to have 6 players make the team, you're really going to have 4 guys that are not on special teams. That seems a bit much, perhaps. So maybe there's an opportunity for him to sneak in there. Likely he would be a practice squad guy, but I think he's a name to keep an eye on for sure. You mentioned some of the bonus money. Carlin Vigors, a defensive back out of Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, tell everybody about Carlin Vigors, DB from Louisiana Monroe. They gave him some significant guaranteed money relative to the other undrafteds, right?
Yeah, he got $259,000 guaranteed. Another cornerback, Fentrell Cypress out of Florida State, got about $145,000. What's interesting about both of these guys is when I was looking at cornerbacks that Washington might take in the draft, guys I was focusing on Siobhan Ravel, the kid out of Florida State, the guy who played with Cypress down there, and Trey Amos were like, these guys were press corners, and this is a style that fits with what Washington wants to do. And Vigors has that sort of size, dimension that makes a lot of sense. 6'1", 205. He's got that press corner style. He played extensively over 3 years in college. Not a ton of stats, and Louisiana Monroe is obviously from a competition standpoint far below the power conference schools, and so on. But they're taking a risk on, or they're taking a chance on the traits, and again, his size, his press coverage ability. This is the type of player you want to take a shot on. And I think their cornerback group, and I would say the same thing with Cypress, a guy who also got good money, as an undrafted guy. I will note that Dane Brugler, he looked at, I don't even know what the final number is, 2,000 players, something insane. But he only wrote like summaries on about like 400 of them. Brooks was one that got a write-up, and Cypress was another one. So I guess Dane has Cypress in his head ranked ahead of Vigors, but that's neither here nor there. But both those guys, like I said, in general, fit the same kind of size and style profile, and that's what you're looking to do. By the way, this is something I think is so important. It isn't enough to just say, go get me talent. Go get a guy who makes sense. Like what do we keep hearing this week about George Pickens getting traded? Well, he's not a Mike Tomlin kind of a guy. Well, they picked him. They took him in the second round. Are they just supposed to? Is the GM not paying attention to what a supposed Mike Tomlin player is? I wrote last season that one of the big reasons why this group had success was that Adam Peters didn't just arrogantly say, I think this guy is good, we're going to pick him and let the coach deal with it. He figured out, hey, Dan Quinn, hey, coaching staff, what are some of the things you're looking for? And then let me go out and find that guy. So, again, I don't know that either one of these Vigors or Cypress is going to factor in at all. Maybe they're practice squad guys, maybe not. But stylistically, they make sense for what is going on here. And that, to me, is as important as anything else, that they understand who they are, what they're trying to do, and find players that can fit. Because if they ever did have to play, you don't want somebody who's like a complete – it doesn't make any sense at all for what you're trying to do. So I think those guys – again, a shot to make the 53 is special teams is going to have to be their hope, like it was with Owens and Yankoff. Yeah. But there's some optimism here in terms of the type of player these guys are.
We do this every year, okay, with people swearing on, they watched Carlin Vigors and there's no chance he's not going to make the team. I talked about just the running back Merritt in the 7th round. 1 out of the last 33 running backs over the last 10 drafts drafted in the 7th round has made an impact in the NFL. And that's Isaiah Pacheco. So the odds are not stacked in his favor in terms of making a big impact. But it's sometimes you're talking about minutia, and I just asked you about the minutia. It doesn't really turn out to be much, but they got to fill out the roster. You got to have 90 going to camp, and they have 90 now. I've got 3 minutes. I want to ask you about maybe another domino to fall, whether it is Matthew Judon or Von Miller or Zadarius Smith or a Nick Chubb. You texted me last week and you said, why are you talking about Nick Chubb? And I just said, because I like him a lot, and I think they should look at him just to check the health. Him and J.K. Dobbins are still sitting out there as free agents, and if they thought he was healthy, and Cleveland is not going to re-sign Chubb, I would certainly take a look at it. So do you think that there's a chance that there's another big ad before training camp? And if so, what's your hunch on who it would be?
Yeah, I would maybe say not necessarily before training camp, like maybe it's during, once they get the guys out on the field. But, maybe they make an assessment in minicamp or OTAs that, hey, we kind of need more. But, sometimes that big light bulb moment may not happen until they're really getting after it in camp. But look, if you pointed to 2 positions, one would be the edge for the reasons that we just discussed. And, there are some guys out there, Jadeveon Clowney was just released by Carolina. He's a known guy, of course.
No ties to Washington, though, right? I was going through the Clowney. Am I right about that? Because I went through almost everything looking for any sort of relationship. I'm sure you did it too.
Correct. I did. I did not notice anything of note. That does obviously seem to be a common factor with not just Washington, but a lot of teams. But no, I didn't see anything obvious there. Look, I think all those potential guys, Darius Smith, et cetera, Von Miller, like they're all basically, the same type of profile. They're over 30, have had big success in the past with sacks and big plays, but, we're now just rotational pieces. And, look, are any of those guys better than, say, Cleveland Farrell? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, you could make an argument in certain ways, but I don't know that the variance is that significant to where you feel like you have to do something. You mentioned the Nick Chubb thing. The running back room is still one where I was my take was they need to get speed on offense. I don't really care where it comes from, and obviously they went with the receiver. I still do wonder about the running back room to an extent, though.
Me too.
I think it is. I think one thing I've wanted to try to figure out that I haven't done as much as I haven't gotten as far as I would like is what happened to the running game last year. Was it because the offensive line was just really struggling to create opportunities? Clearly, they thought they needed an offensive line upgrade. Not that Laramie Tunsil is a run blocker, but whatever. He's obviously very good. Then they draft Connerly. But, is Brian Robinson consistent enough? Can they rely on Austin Eckler to stay healthy, et cetera? I still wonder about that. Not that there's any really dynamic running backs out there. You mentioned Chubb. Maybe an extra year removed from his significant injury changes things, but there's just some guys out there. But I still wonder if that's a spot where maybe there's some change potentially happening or could happen. I'm not saying it would, but and I wrote about this the other day. somebody asked me in my mailbag about, are there players that you could see getting traded the way that Jahan Dotson and John Ridgeway were traded last year to recoup some picks? And, I think Brian Robinson was a name that I mentioned because, again, it's not that it's necessarily likely or that, that they have somebody who would be better than him. But what happened with that last year? His numbers fell way off. He's not a guy that you could put out there all 3 downs. He's limited as a pass blocker. Yeah. Do they want somebody who's at least, even if it's not somebody who has his maybe upside between the tackles, somebody who's more consistent across the board? Perhaps, and maybe one of those guys is Chubb or somebody else. So I think those are the 2 spots to me that if something is going to happen sooner than later or during camp would be the 2 areas to look at.
I agree. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you.
Likewise, man. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Up next, Sean McDonough will jump on with us. Of course, he is the lead hockey voice for ABC ESPN.
That's blocked by Martin. They didn't get it out. Carlson across for Ovechkin. Checking the defenseman's at the net. Now Carlson scores! John Carlson! A power play goal! As Wilson slides it through Chatfield, and John Carlson, the longest serving Capital, comes in on the back door.
First voice you heard is that of one of the best in the business, one of the best ever do it, Sean McDonough, last night in D.C. again with Ray Ferraro and Emily Kaplan on the call of Washington's 3-1 Game 2 win to even up the series. It resumes tomorrow night in Raleigh against Carolina. Sean McDonough, nice enough to join us right now. You know, I've had you on the show before, not that I'm asking you to remember it, but you've always been one of my favorites. I think you're just incredible at what you do. And before we get to last night's game and this series, I've thought about this as it relates to you over the years. I don't think anybody has ever done 4 sports at the level that you've done them at. Maybe there are some people that I'm forgetting. I don't think Al did, I don't think Michaels or Summerall did hockey. I don't think Costas did. I could be wrong. But am I right that in terms of doing football, basketball, baseball, and hockey at a very high level, that you are unique?
I guess, I first of all, I really appreciate your kind comments, Kevin, and thanks for having me on. I guess, I haven't really thought about it that much. I know some of the people you mentioned and some others who come to mind. Marv Albert obviously did the Rangers for a long time, did NBC football, was best known for the basketball, but I don't think Marv ever did baseball.
Right.
I think I can think of other people who probably did 2 or 3 at a national level, but I really don't know the answer to your question. I just feel very fortunate because I love doing all the sports. It's really what I love about my situation at ESPN, the opportunity to do a lot of different things. And I get asked all the time, well, of all these sports you do, what's your favorite one? And I never have an answer because I really enjoy all of them. When I grew up knowing this is what I want to do for a living, I was a all-around sports fan and kind of wanted to do exactly what I'm doing now.
Yeah, obviously with your father doing what he did for all those years. So how about not your favorite? Is there one that you think you do best?
I don't know. I think if I had to say, I'd probably get the most positive feedback about college football. The feedback about hockey tends to be I'm great or terrible, and nobody seems to be in the middle.
Yeah.
That's not exactly true. That's an exaggeration. But, what I like most now about my situation is if you said what would be the 2 favorite things that you would do, I would say hockey and college football. And that's really exactly what I'm doing now. I'm doing the occasional other thing every now and then. I do a baseball game or a golf event. I'm kind of disappointed that they moved the PGA Championship to May because, I used to be able to do that in August with ESPN and our group, but now they've moved it to May. It's in the middle of the hockey playoffs, so I don't get to do that anymore. But I really feel blessed because the 2 things I enjoy the most, hockey and college football, are the things that I'm majoring in right now.
What do you think for you? What's the hardest to do? What's the easiest to do?
I think hockey is the hardest, and in large part just because of the handicap, like last night there in Washington, of being really far away from the action. I mean, we're extremely high. I always tell friends of mine, in most of these arenas, if you bought the worst seat, it'd be the last row of the upper deck. Well, go up there and then look further up and further away from the ice, and that's where we are. So
yeah, I know where that press box is. That's way up there.
Yeah, it's way up there. And, it's really hard to be sure exactly where the puck is. A lot of times it's difficult to tell the players apart, like with Washington, 80 Dubois and 88 Mangiapane, it looks a lot alike from up above. 22 and 27 look alike. So, there's a hesitation where in some of these places you have a low booth. I was envious watching Bob Wischusen last night in Vegas. You're about 20 rows off the ice. You feel like you can reach out and touch the players, you're that close. So you really know where the puck is and if the shot hit the goalie's pad or if it just completely missed the net or if it grazed the post, where, most of these arenas were so high and so far away, it's kind of an educated guess. And it really slows down your call. When you're down low and you know what's happening, it just comes out much more crisply than it does. I hate when I watch the tapes when we're really far away because there's just a slowness about the call that I wish wasn't there, but it's really a byproduct of just not being 100% sure all the time what's going on.
Well, first of all, you said most places are really high up. So the Caps are not unique from that standpoint?
No. As a matter of fact, Carolina's worse. Florida's really bad last year. And even this year, you may have noticed if you watched the game, we did a game at Florida in the Tampa Bay, Florida series, and ESPN, with the cooperation of the Panthers and the NHL, we were there for the Stanley Cup final last year. They built us lower booth, basically on a platform where they put some still photographers. And again, about 15 or 20 rows off the ice. And the difference is incredible, not just in, how quickly you're able to identify everything and be sure of what you're seeing and what's actually happening, but the emotion of the crowd. Where we are, most of these places, you're really separated from the energy and the noise because you're just so far up in this sterile booth with a headset on. Where when we were down there, I mean, when Ray Ferraro was speaking after a couple of Florida goals, I couldn't hear a word he was saying in my headset because it's just so loud. You're enveloped by the noise. So I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of the TV booths around the NHL are very high, and there are a handful of low ones. Edmonton is low. Dallas is kind of in the middle, but it's really good. Montreal's awesome. Pittsburgh's really good. New Jersey, but most of them are far away. And unfortunately, the two in this series are really far away.
Just out of curiosity, when you're in, and I know where that perch is, I mean, there's altitude. You almost need oxygen at Capital One where you sit and where the media sits. Do you call the action with binoculars, or do you sometimes go off the live feed in the monitor?
No, I don't do either one, and I've tried both. It's just really hard to follow the puck for me through a pair of binoculars from that distance. And then you kind of get focused in too much on the puck, and you don't see things that would be out of the periphery of the binoculars, like, the defenseman fell down or the goalie lost his stick or things like that. So I don't do that. I don't know. I've asked a lot of my colleagues, do you ever call it off the monitor? And I've never heard one person who says yes. Another part of that problem is the monitors aren't very big, so it's not much of a help. So it's just, it's the nature of it. I just celebrate when we have a booth that's low. A part of me is cheering for that we'll have the Western Conference final if it's, Edmonton or Vegas or Dallas or even Winnipeg, because all of those booths are low compared to the Eastern Conference final. All four of these are super high. Toronto is very high as well. As a matter of fact, when we did the All-Star game up in Toronto, I guess it was 2 years ago now, Burke Magnus, who's one of our bosses who basically runs now the production side of ESPN, came to the booth, and first thing he said to me was, "Are all the booths this high?" And I was like, "No, but most of them, And it was a good thing he came up there because he was one of the people who signed off on us having the low booth for the Stanley Cup final last year in Florida, which was a huge difference maker.
We're talking to, of course, and you recognize the voice, Sean McDonough. I mentioned, I think there's a uniqueness to the four sports that you've done at a very high level. I also think, and I've made this observation about you before as a fan on my show before, I think there's a uniqueness to your style from this perspective, and I'm wondering if you think it's fair. I think as a play-by-play guy, it's unique to inject opinion into the call, which I feel I get from you. Now, let me just say, I love it, and I think your opinions are super sharp in all of the sports that you do. I'm not an expert on hockey, so I have no idea if you're right or wrong, but do you feel that observation is fair, that maybe relative to other play-by-play guys, that you inject more opinion and analysis than a lot of other play-by-play guys do?
Yes, I do think it's fair, and I have always been that way. And I think it's a product. You mentioned my dad earlier. I grew up the son of Will McDonough, was a famous sports writer and the pioneer of the first newspaper man who made the transition into television as what Adam Schefter does now. And when we were kids, we'd sit and I had two brothers, and we're all sports fans. My sister's sports fans too, and we'd sit and watch games with my dad, and we wouldn't just stare blankly at the screen. I mean, he'd engage us in conversation about whatever it was, the officiating, the why do you think the coach went for that first down, or do you think he should have? So I think we were kind of taught to be analytical thinkers from an early age just by sitting there with him. And I've always said, Kevin, that I think my job is to be talking about what the people at home are thinking about when they watch the game. If I'm sitting in the booth and I think, wow, that's a really bad call, then chances are most of the people who are watching the game are thinking that too. So that's something that we should be talking about. And I don't think, opinion just needs to be the domain of the analyst. I think we're around these sports all the time. Hopefully we're educated enough that we would have an educated opinion. So that's really what I try to do. Just talk about what I think that the people, if they were sitting on their couch watching the game with us, what they'd be saying to each other as they were watching the game.
Yeah, I look, as somebody who is not asked to report on anything but to opine on everything, I actually don't mind that, and I think you do it really well. There's been some discussion, as I'm sure there is with everything that you do from fan bases. And you mentioned that in hockey, you get probably as much, constructive critique as you do with anything. Do you feel that you've gotten that from Caps fans in these first two games?
If I have, I don't know, because I don't do social media.
Okay.
I don't have a Twitter account, Instagram, any of that stuff. I never have. I don't even try to look into it. So the only time I'm really aware of the feedback is if I see an article. Somebody set me up with this Google search thing. So whenever my name appears in an article, I get a link to it through Google. So, I see, and some of them, they aren't all just mainstream articles. Some of them are, websites that I've never heard of or you've never heard of, like most people listening.
Of course.
Have never heard
you
of.
can't.
So,
right.
but what's interesting is they write articles based on 5 tweets from random people out there who may have 6 followers each, and then people are outraged. Viewers are outraged that Sean McDonough's on this game,
Right.
And it's just funny because, it's both ends of the spectrum. The other night there was an article about the Colorado fans were upset that I was doing Game 7 because Bob Wischusen had done the series up till then. And then there was another article about Joe Buck had tweeted out that he was in awe of Kenny Albert and me and our talent because of the great job that we did in the Game 7s of the Dallas and Winnipeg series there on back-to-back nights. So that's more meaningful to me. If 6 people sitting in their basement want to tweet out something that I'm not any good, they're entitled to that opinion, and I'm 100% fine with it. I tend to pay more attention to the Joe Bucks and the Marv Alberts and Bob Costas and Mike Breens and people like that who have sent me very nice texts about hockey over the years, saying they really enjoy it. So that's more important to me. I care about what people who are educated in the sport think, and the vast majority of the feedback that I've gotten within the sport has been extremely positive.
Well, as you should. And just to be completely open, I talked about this at the beginning because there was some, from Caps fans, some criticism that you were showing some sort of bias towards Carolina or anti to Washington. And I think that's a product of 2 things. One, we're just coming off the first round in which we get the hometown announcers. Now, Joe Beninati's as good as it gets. I'm sure you're very familiar with Joe and Craig
100%.
Laughlin.
I've said that many times. I think
they're great.
Going to win the Foster Hewitt Award and go into the broadcasters part of the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's great.
He's great.
And then, so is Smoke and Al Koken and the rest of their group.
Al's great. Alan May, Craig Laughlin. It's a phenomenal, team that's been together for years. But I think the other part of it is the Caps were dominated in Game 1. The score didn't reflect that. And then in the first period last night, it felt like an extension.
More of the same. If they watch, we were on for a lot of those Montreal games, and I think if they watched our telecast instead of Joe and Locker, and they made a good choice to watch Joe and Locker, they wouldn't have felt like we were biased. If anything, when the home team does well, and you played the call of the John Carlson goal last night, I certainly yelled more loudly than I would have if the other team scored because you're yelling over the home crowd. So.
Yeah.
I also don't. It's another reason why I don't have social media because I just don't pay any attention to that. I don't care who wins. I really don't. And I'd have no reason to be biased in favor of Carolina and against Washington. I don't.
Especially since Carolina's positioning for you is even worse than Washington.
It's even worse.
Right.
And and quite frankly, I mean, if you're going to say, well, what would you like to see going forward? Carolina plays a style that doesn't always translate to very exciting TV. They play that grinded out, low scoring defensive game. It's not an up and down game, as we've seen in these first 2 games. So, I mean, if anything, you'd want the team that has a better chance to go up and down to be successful. But I honestly don't care, and it's just, Yeah, your hometown announcers are going to be more skewed toward your home team when you watch them, because that's what they should be doing.
So let's talk about the state of the series, because through the first period last night, I think there was a lot of concern and worry. What happened in the final two periods, and how does that sort of carry over to Game 3?
Yeah, I think the concern was justified. I was concerned for Washington too. We met with Spencer Carberry. We meet with both coaches before every game. And the first thing I said to him before last night's game was, well, how is this going to be different? Because if it's not different, the likelihood of them winning was pretty low. As you said, the score was close in Game 1, but if you watch the game, it really wasn't close territorially and that sort of thing. So, I wasn't sure, when he said, well, we can do basically what they did to us, which is get the puck in the offensive end and keep it in there. And it didn't, as you said, Kevin, it didn't start out that way. And then, they kind of came around to it, especially in the second period. I mean, they had 11 shots on goal in the second period. They had 14 the entire first game. So, they are capable of doing it. They have guys who can go in on the forecheck and retrieve the puck and cause turnovers, and they did some of that last night. So I think it's a really even series. I think there are two teams that in many ways stylistically are similar. Both coaches have said that. And, I think it's going to be a long series.
What do you think of this sport from this perspective? Because I do think you've got your observations are always keen and sharp, in that we could watch a game like Tuesday nights in which I'm not a hockey guy, and I came in here and said I'm a sports fan. That was clearly a one-sided beatdown, and yet the score didn't reflect it. The Caps could have easily won that game. They were up 1-0 through, half of the third period. What do you think about a sport which the results tend to be random, for the lack of a better description?
Yeah, I think that's sometimes the case. I mean, some teams that dominate the game win 6-1 too. So, that happens. I think it's been a recurring theme with Carolina, right? This is the way they've played for 7 years now under Rod Brindamore. And I think he feels like they have to play that way because they don't necessarily have, the guys who are going to carry the puck through the other team. And a lot of teams don't have those guys because there aren't that many of them. But he really believes this is the way they need to play offense. Get people in front of the net, get as many pucks toward the net as you can, and maybe you wind up like the winning goal in Game 1, Jacob Slavin. It wasn't pretty, but, you keep throwing the puck at the net, and sooner or later some of those are going to go in. So, but you're right. The premise of your question is spot on. It can happen that one team seems to dominate territorially, piles up many more shots, but doesn't win. It almost happened, as you said, in Game 1. And, the other great equalizer in hockey is the goalie. I mean, you could,
of course,
dominate. And Logan Thompson obviously played really well in both games. But, one team could dominate territorially in the shot totals. But if the goalie plays great for the other team, that's the great equalizer. And it's part of what makes hockey great, in my opinion.
Why do you think, and we're sitting here at 1-1, but even going back to before Game 1, why do you think the Caps, who ended up with the best record in the Eastern Conference, the second best record in the sport during the regular season, are shorted so much by odds makers, by so-called experts? They were an underdog going into this series. They're still an underdog in this series. They're the last odds favorite to win the cup out of the 8 teams, remaining. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. And I assume that's determined by people who actually bet on these things. I don't know. I mean, I think part of it might be that they didn't finish the season well. Maybe that turned some people sour on them. Yeah, I thought that was really understandable. They had a variety of reasons why I think they weren't very good at the end of the year. I think the Ovechkin thing, took a lot of the attention and maybe took something out of them a little bit, at least in terms of the focus. I think they had their playoff spot secured so early that, there wasn't the motivation to keep driving because we need to make the playoffs or we need to make sure we're the number 1 seed. I think the injury to Protas at the end of the year was key, and it's key to their chances now that he's back because he was one of the best players in the league this year and, on any team. When you talk about
Right.
30 goals, 66 points. His size and speed, penalty killing ability. I mean, he was plus 40 in the regular season, which was third best in the league. He's a great player. And I give the Caps a lot of credit because, a lot of teams, when they decide, well, we're going to turn over the roster a little bit, which they started to do a couple of years ago, they tear it all down and then, try to build it back up again. And that doesn't work. I mean, look at Chicago, look at Arizona, look at what San Jose is going through now. It doesn't work. Or if it does, it takes a really long time. They had faith, Brian McClellan, Chris Patrick, the coaches, they had faith in guys like McMichael and Protis, who were first-round picks. These guys are going to develop, and they're going to score more, and they're going to give us more. And they did. And I think that's been a huge part of the success of their team. And then some of the other additions they made, bringing in guys like Matt Roy has been a nice addition, and some others. Obviously, the trade for Dubois worked out well. But, to answer your question, I don't know the answer, because when I look at their team, I think they're really solid in every area. I mean, we're seeing what Logan Thompson's capable of doing from a goaltending standpoint. He did it for most of the year. They do have depth of scoring. I think, unlike Carolina, which annually struggles with, we just don't have enough guys we can depend on to get us a goal if we really need it, which is why I was surprised they flipped Rantanen to Dallas. Washington does. They have 3 lines, even 4 lines. I mean, when you look at what a guy like Duhaime's been doing on the 4th line, that can give you scoring, and the defense corps can give you scoring, as we saw last night from Carlson. And Chikrin's, one of the best defensemen in the league from that standpoint. So I don't understand it. I think they're one of the best teams in the league. They were the number 1 seed in the East for a reason. I think they have as good a chance as anybody to win the Stanley Cup.
Last one, and I appreciate the time. This era of Alex Ovechkin in this town has produced 1 cup and 1 deep run. That's it, 2018. And then we had, a memorable season with him chasing down Gretzky this year. Do you think that he and, basically everybody by extension in the organization needs another deep run for, a much stronger legacy than just the 1 year of playoff success?
I don't think he does. To me, he cemented himself as one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. Maybe the greatest, obviously. He got 2 Gretzky in the same number of games, which was remarkable, really. I mean, it was so amazing to me that it was literally the same number of games. His place is secure forever. I mean, he's one of the great players of all time. And what I admire more the last few years, we've been back in the NHL for 4 years now at ABC and ESPN, and done a bunch of Capitals games, and that he has done it while playing such a physical style, being so eager to go hit people, and been as durable as he's been. I mean, he missed the 17 games this year, 16 of them because of the broken leg. I'm still mad at Spencer Carberry for taking him out on that Saturday afternoon a few weeks ago at the end of the regular season. We had a Saturday afternoon game of the week, you may remember, in Columbus, and he had just gotten the record. And really, the reason we scheduled that game, our programming people did, was
you thought it was going to be
he does it.
Yeah.
But so he didn't play. So I said to Spencer in our meeting before the game, I'm taking back my vote for the Jack Adams Award because I just voted for you, but now I'm not sure I'm going to if you're not going to have Ovechkin in our game on national TV today. But no, I don't think he needs it.
I really appreciate this. You're incredible at what you do. Keep it up. I think you're off Washington, Carolina. I think TNT's got the next few games, and then you're back on it towards the end of the series.
A lot of NBA coming up. We split the hockey and the NBA with TNT, so it's a nice partnership. They take over. We would be back if there's a game 6 and 7 in Carolina and Washington, and I think there will be at least a 6 because I don't see anybody winning 3 games in a row here. From this point on.
Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate the time. Take care.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks.
Sean McDonough, everybody. There you go. On the call of games 1 and 2. Yeah, the hockey arena setup for the announcers is usually not great. There's not a lot of room, when it's played on ice and there aren't seats on the floor. All right, we are done for the day. I'll have my entire mock schedule out tomorrow on my podcast, and I'll bring all of it to the show on Monday. Again, I have them opening at Dallas on Sunday night, September 7th, and have them playing in Madrid. I had it before the leaks. on November 16th. Have a great weekend. Chris Russell's next.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State's Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable.
All right, the Pablo Torre is reporting that Jordan Hudson is no longer allowed in the UNC football facility. UNC has come out to deny these reports and has said, quote, while Jordan Hudson is not an employee at the university or Carolina Athletics, she is welcome to the Carolina football facilities. Jordan will continue to manage all activities related to Coach Belichick's personal brand outside of his responsibilities for Carolina football and the university. Pablo Torre has responded in a tweet that is too long for me to read right now. The Washington Capitals get their lick back against Carolina to tie the series at 1-1. Connor McMichael opened the scoring, and Logan Thompson had 27 saves on 28 shots, posting a .964 save percentage. The Oilers take down the Golden Knights in overtime. Connor McDavid with a silky pass to Leon Draisaitl to ice the game. Oilers win 5-4. The Nats will take on the St. Louis Cardinals tonight. Mitchell Parker is expected on the bump, and the Nats on deck starts at 6:15 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.